Areas, it's fine, dry and warm as well. If anything, warmer than it was on Friday. Highs there of 21 to 23 degrees. Still a bit more of a breeze towards the south. Now, as we head through the rest of Saturday into the evening and overnight, again, it stays dry across the board. Lots of clear skies, one or two mist and fog patches once again. But then through the night, we start to see more low clouds spreading in from the North Sea to affect many central and eastern parts of England and into eastern Scotland as well. Here, temperatures won't be quite so low, but further towards the west, once again, a chilly night to come. Temperatures widely falling into single figures. As for Sunday then, we get up to a cloudier start across more central and eastern parts first thing on Sunday. Sunshine from the word go further towards the west, but much of that cloud in the east will burn up and break away as we head through the day, leaving another fine and dry day for most places. Still a bit more cloud though down that North Sea coast, and that will keep it cooler here. As we head into the early part of next week, staying fine and dry, lots more sunshine to come, and again feeling pleasantly warm if you're in that sunshine.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway,
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners on TV, radio and online. This is GB News. Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's 8 o'clock on television, on radio and online in the United Kingdom and across the world. This is Mark Dolan Tonight. Is Boris Johnson trying to destroy Rishi Sunak's government? I'll be asking Maverick Tory MP and Boris supporter Michael Fabricant. Also this hour, I'll be speaking to a 34-year-old man who has incurable bowel cancer, all because the NHS turned into a COVID-only service during the pandemic. He tells his moving story live shortly. And as a GP asks new parents if their baby is trans, and as the NHS now performs gender swap surgery every day of the year, is the publicly funded NHS now in the grip of trans ideology. At 9 o'clock, in my big opinion, I'll be dealing with woke nationwide. And in my take at 10, some truth bombs about Phillip Schofield and Holly Willoughby. He claims homophobia. Is that true? My response at 10. Plus, we'll be hearing from the brilliant TV star and This Morning regular, Kim Woodburn. Lots to get through. A big 3 hours to come. It's Friday night, so the weekend starts here. Put something cold and fizzy in the fridge, and I'll see you after the headlines with the always fizzy Bethany Elsey.
Mark, thank you. Here's your top stories from the GB newsroom. Boris Johnson says he sent unredacted WhatsApp messages directly to the COVID inquiry, bypassing the Cabinet Office. The former Prime Minister told the inquiry chair he would like to do the same with messages on an old phone that's locked due to security concerns. It has discussions on it from before May 2021. It's after the inquiry announced it's bringing a legal challenge against the Cabinet Office after it missed yesterday's deadline to hand over all Mr. Johnson's messages and diaries. A 19-year-old has been sentenced to life in prison with a minimum term of 6 years after pleading guilty to planning terror attacks on the police and military. Matthew King from Essex converted to Islam and became radicalised during the COVID lockdown. The judge praised his mother, who reported him to the Prevent Counter-Terrorism programme, saying it couldn't have been easy but was absolutely the right thing. At least 50 people have been killed and 350 hospitalised after 2 passenger trains collided with a goods train in India. Officials say the Coromandel Express, which runs from Kolkata to Chennai, crashed into the Howrah Superfast Express in the eastern state of Odisha. Videos show people climbing over the toppled carriages as the injured were carried to ambulances. Rescue operations are underway. 20 people have now been arrested in relation to the riots that followed a crash in which 2 teenagers were killed in Cardiff. The deaths of Kyrie Sullivan and Harvey Evans, who were 16 and 15, sparked violence and disorder on the streets of Ely after claims they were pursued by police. CCTV shows the boys on an electric bike being followed by a police van. 15 officers were injured in the riots. Phillip Schofield says he's lost everything after revelations of his affair with a younger male colleague at This Morning. The 61-year-old resigned from ITV last week after admitting to the affair and says he'll comply with an external review commissioned by the broadcaster. Schofield has hit out at what he describes as relentless criticism and told the BBC he feels ashamed and sorry, but insists he didn't groom him.
Was a completely innocent backwards and forwards over a period of time about a job, about careers. You know, I mean, you do that. What's wrong with that? What was unwise was the fact that it happened, and that was a very, very grave error. Now, it was consensual, but it was my fault.
More disruption for holidaymakers as security guards at Heathrow Airport announce further strike action this summer. Unite the Union says its members will stage 33 days of industrial action in a dispute over pay. The walkouts will take place almost every weekend from mid-June to the end of August. You're up to date on TV, online and DAB+ radio. This is GB News. Now it's back to Mark.
Great to have Bethany Elsey back. She returns at 9. Welcome to Mark Dolan tonight. Happy Friday, one and all. Is Boris Johnson trying to destroy Rishi Sunak's government? I'll be asking Maverick Tory MP and Boris supporter Michael Fabricant. As a GP asks new parents if their baby is trans, and as the health service now performs gender swap surgery every day, have they cured cancer? Is the publicly funded NHS now in the grip of trans ideology? Meanwhile, I'll be speaking to a 34-year-old man who has incurable bowel cancer. all because the NHS turned into a COVID-only service during the pandemic. He tells his incredible story in just a few minutes. In my Take a 10 following his bombshell interview with the Sun newspaper, I'm not buying Phillip Schofield's crocodile tears. Tonight's newsmaker is the fearless TV star Kim Woodburn, who'll be dropping more truth bombs about the Schofield saga. Mark Dolan tonight is the home of the papers, with tomorrow's front pages at exactly 10:30 sharp, plus your emails, especially the spicy ones, mark at gbnews.com. Lots to get through. We'll start with this. There's trouble in the corridors of power. A deadline has passed for the government to hand over WhatsApp messages to the COVID inquiry. It was given until 4 p.m. yesterday to disclose messages between Boris Johnson and his advisors during the pandemic, as well as his diaries and notebooks. But the government have refused to share some of the material, arguing it's not relevant to the inquiry's work. This could end in a legal battle. Well, in a sensational development, Boris Johnson has gone over the heads of Downing Street and Rishi Sunak to send the COVID inquiry all of the messages that they have requested. Let's get the views now of the Conservative MP for Lichfield, Michael Fabricant. Michael, is this an attack on Rishi Sunak? Now, we've lost the audio to Michael Fabricant, which many would argue is a mixed blessing, and we'll definitely get his view shortly. But it is astonishing because essentially the government do not want all of those WhatsApp messages to go to the COVID inquiry. They were willing to go to court over it in order to actually win that battle. Well, Boris has done a rather sneaky thing and sent the material anyway. Some of the material had to be dredged out of a very old phone, probably a Nokia brick that Boris was using before 2021. But what do you think? Should Rishi Sunak be sharing all of that material? I would argue that nothing should be under wraps. After all, those pandemic measures affected all of us, affected the economy, affected school closures. I want that paper trail. So we've got all of that to debate. We'll debate that with Michael Fabricant. Oh, he's back. He's back in the room. I was about to tell you what's on my mind, but I'm delighted to say that Tory MP Michael Fabricant, you'll never be silenced again on this programme, let me tell you.
Absolutely. Technology will never overpower me or Boris.
Now, Michael Fabricant, is this a scorched earth policy on the part of Boris Johnson? What's he up to?
I think he's just trying to be absolutely open. He gave his first phone, the most recent phone, and then he said he would give his old phone, and I know that he had to change his phone because I knew he had a new phone number and all the rest of it, and they've given him the phone there as well, so he's handed everything in. But of course, what's going to be interesting is what is actually on the phone. Now, Baroness Hallett has said that she's not going to publicise anything which has nothing to do with COVID, but I dare say there's a lot of interesting stuff. I know there's a lot of interesting stuff on my WhatsApps with various friends.
Yeah, well, I'm more interested in the pictures on your WhatsApp rather than the messages, Michael. But listen, let's talk about Rishi Sunak. What's he got to hide?
Well, I mean, we're just speculating, aren't we? For all I know, there may have been arguments. I'm just completely guessing and speculating, but maybe there were arguments between Rishi when he was Chancellor and Boris, one when he was Prime Minister. That's what one or two journalists have speculated. Maybe there was even, I don't know, arguments about who should be the future leader. We can only guess, but it's very, very interesting stuff.
It's not a good look, though, is it, for the government to push back in this way and risk a legal battle?
That's right. And in fact, a government minister has said that he doesn't even think that the legal battle is winnable. So I do sometimes think, you know, if you don't think you can win a battle, don't go into it in the first place. But it's not a good look. But I do understand what the government's talking about. You see, a lot of decisions are made after informal discussions between civil servants and other civil servants and ministers, and between ministers and ministers. Now, if all of that is got to be in the open, then I think a lot of the decisions that are made by government will be hampered. So it's quite an interesting little area of legal points here, whether or not we should make stuff which is irrelevant, available to the Hallett inquiry, which after all is only to be on COVID.
Well, yes, speaking of COVID, you've always been the arbiter of common sense, of truth, of probity.
You flatter me.
Michael Fabricant, let me tell you, Fabricant 4 p.m, we can dare but dream. But I'm worried about this COVID inquiry. I'm worried it's going to be a stitch-up in which a generation of politicians and public health officials will just try to demonstrate they did the right thing, when many would argue, including the highly respected Professor Carol Sikora, the cancer oncologist, that lockdowns were the biggest mistake ever. Will the truth out about COVID and whether the measures worked?
I don't think so. The point is that if you look at the death rates, actually we did quite well in the UK. We did better than Germany. We're about the same as France. But, Sweden adopted a different policy. Sweden just said, you know what? Use your common sense. And all right, they're so not densely populated as a country as the United Kingdom. We've got 70 million people on a small island, and that's pretty dense population. But having said all that, will it actually teach us any lessons for years to come? Should there be another pandemic? I'm not sure. I'm not sure we're going to learn anything out of it. And as you quite rightly say, I think it'll all be about the civil servants trying to show that they were right and ministers were wrong. But that won't help us in the future.
Michael, before we let you get to that Friday night glass of Chablis, extra chilled, a quick response from you on the Phillip Schofield drama. Is he the victim of a homophobic witch hunt?
I don't think so. I actually think the trouble is that, he was unwise in what he did. I'm told that he wasn't that popular on set. He was actually quite a difficult person to work with, a prima donna. And we never have prima donnas on GB News, do we? And also, I don't know about you, but when I've seen him speak and give his views about what happened, it all looks like acting to me. But maybe I'm being very unfair.
Well, yes, he said in an interview that actually, if it was a straight presenter, this wouldn't be a story. I don't think that's true.
No, I don't think that's true either. I think at the end of the day, you've got to be professional and you've got to be dealing with people in a way that actually reflects not only your professionalism, but the professionalism of the TV station that you're on. And that's something that I think ITV has got a lot of questions to answer. I mean, for example, the young runner who was on the This Morning programme, we know that ITV has said they're going to look after him. And I happen to know that the Culture, Media and Sport Committee will be asking the question, well, in what way are you going to look after him? Are you going to give him money to keep silent? Interesting questions. And it's not just Phillip Schofield in the dock. Sadly, it's ITV too.
Michael, have a brilliant weekend. Thank you for joining us on Mark Dolan tonight, the Tory MP for Lichfield, Michael Fabricant. Lots more to come. I'll be dealing with Phillip Schofield in my take at 10. Hopefully, my last public comments about this ridiculous story. I don't buy his crocodile tears. More on that after 10. You won't want to miss it. Lots more to come. As a GP asks new parents if their baby is trans, is the publicly funded NHS now in the grip of trans ideology? Plus, I'll be joined by a very brave guy who's battling inoperable bowel cancer, all because of those COVID lockdowns. Plus your calls in Dial Dolan. It's all to come. See you in 2.
First and foremost, I'm a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News. Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There'll be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
At 9 o'clock, I'll be dealing with woke nationwide. But how about this one, folks? A GP has greeted newborn parents with an extraordinary question about their baby. Is it trans? Meanwhile, it emerges that the so-called and allegedly cash-strapped NHS is now performing gender swap surgery every single day. So is the NHS now in the grip of trans ideology? Let's speak to the political commentator and somebody that previously identified as female, Ollie London, whose book, Gender Madness, is creating a lot of excitement. It's available for pre-order, Gender Madness. And let me tell you, Ollie London has won an award, folks. Yes, indeed. The WIBA Awards for Most Influential Personalities in the World of Social Media. And actually, your award relates very much to this story. Mm-hmm. What's going on with a GP asking parents of a newborn, is it trans?
I mean, it's just crazy. These are babies. And this is just one way that gender ideology is seeping into society. So first you have this one GP and the next it'll be more GPs following suit and stuff. And it's just going to get worse. We're seeing schools asking some children to state their pronouns, to state whether they're non-binary or trans. And look, these are questions that aren't suitable for kids. When you're an adult, you can make a decision about how your identity, but kids can't comprehend or they can't understand that. So I just think it's totally ludicrous that a doctor's surgery is asking about babies whether they're trans.
And you speak on this story with considerable authority. Give me a sort of potted history of your journey.
Right, so I had many different identity struggles throughout my life that stemmed from different reasons: bullying, body dysmorphia, gender dysphoria, and I did actually identify as trans. I had all of the facial feminization surgeries, which was very painful, so I did that actually.
So you became a girl for a while?
Yes, and I was living publicly as a woman, and that, you know, I got to a point where I was like, this isn't the authentic me. I need to actually step back and find the real me and find myself. And you know, it took a lot of time to find that person that was trapped within, but I'm very grateful now, and obviously there are people out there that generally are trans and they felt like that their whole life. And, I felt a certain kind of pressure because I use social media all the time. I was spending like 5 hours a day on TikTok, and all you tend to see is these gender ideology videos. And that was me as an adult. But my concern is kids, when they're going online and they're being exposed to this in the schools, in the classrooms, it's harmful because kids' minds are very easy to mold. So I think, if somebody identifies as trans, that's a decision to make as an adult, but kids cannot make that decision.
Is it grooming?
In some cases it is. I mean, if you're specifically targeting children with the purpose of trying to confuse them, that is definitely grooming. Grooming is quite a loaded word because it can, if it's associated with the LGBT community, it can upset people. But when you're actually targeting children specifically, I mean, even with, there was cases in the US recently, Target, a supermarket, had this gender ideology pride collection for babies and toddlers. And that is what you would consider grooming or indoctrinating children, because it's planting the seed in their mind that's making this all over the place. On cartoons, they have non-binary characters in some cartoons. On TikTok, they're seeing this. So it's this concerted push to try and confuse these children. And it's just not fair. These kids just need to be left alone.
Are these children not being educated into the fact that people do identify by different genders? Are critics of the US store Target, are critics of the NHS's gender-affirming care just dinosaurs?
Well, look, kids do need to be educated on certain things. And, kids are born without judging anyone, right? So they don't judge people. They don't have these preconceptions. So, I get the argument where people will say, oh, we need to teach kids about this because it's equality. But at the same time, when you're teaching kids about being trans and non-binary in the classroom and constantly pushing that message, it's very confusing for kids, especially when they're teenagers, when they have peer pressure, social media influences, all of these different things combined. That's the real harm, and kids are susceptible. So I think, pushing all of this stuff constantly is concerning.
Is there a war on gender?
There absolutely is. I mean, women are facing the biggest threat to their rights since the suffragettes movement. And it really is concerning to see women that speak up for their rights. You had Professor Kathleen Stock, speaking at the Oxford Union recently, and trans activists stormed in, they glued themselves.
She needed security.
She needed security. And, no woman should have to put up with that simply for speaking their mind, speaking up for women's rights. So I think it's really wrong that there's this concerted push to take away the rights of women. And look, nobody had an issue with anyone's identity until recently. It was only when people started to try and push women into a corner to try and take their rights. That's when it got really heated.
Women's sport, women-only spaces, that kind of thing.
100%. So we just need to respect women, and everybody can coexist. Women, trans people, everybody can coexist, but it's about doing that in a respectful manner that's not going to take away the rights or the spaces of women.
What about those, let's say, a trans woman who'd like to participate in women's sport? If they're not allowed to, if they're precluded from doing so, that could be deeply humiliating, and that could send them into a depressive spiral. Don't we need to take their feelings into account?
Everybody should be allowed to play sports. Everybody should be allowed to compete. But the solution would be to have a separate category. So British Cycling recently announced that they're actually going to ban biological men competing in the women's category, but they're going to make the men's category open. So that's one solution, or even having a category that's for non-binary trans people to compete against each other.
But isn't that transphobic to have a trans category? You're effectively saying a trans woman is not a woman.
Well, that's the argument that I think trans athletes like to make, because they don't want, they want to be, included as a woman. They want all of the same rights as a woman. But we have to look at biology. It's not fair. Competitive sports is something that women train for many, many years to do. And same with trans athletes, they have to train for a long time, but when they're biologically male, they do have a significant advantage. So it's about fairness, because you don't have, doping in sports, you don't allow performance-enhancing drugs. So why would you allow somebody that has a significant advantage to compete against women? It's just in the interest of fairness.
How about the cover of Glamour magazine this month? You've been tweeting about it. You've got so many followers on Twitter. At Ollie London, always worth a look. And this is an amazing story. It's a pregnant man on the front cover. Is that progress?
It's not progress because, firstly, this is one of the UK's biggest women's magazines. And, you know, it's offensive to women because, you know, how many women get pregnant every year? There's around 200 million women get pregnant around the world. So to you know, not include women in this, why not feature a pregnant woman? I know this person is a woman, but they're trying to claim to be a man. They've cut their breasts off. Why not feature an actual woman on the magazine? I think it's deeply offensive. And also, I think it sets a dangerous precedent because this person can't even breastfeed now. So what is that telling us? You know, that's actually going to cause problems for the kid and stuff. So I just think it's offensive, it's very distasteful, and it disrespects women.
We want to live in a world where if you choose to be Loretta rather than Steve, then we're going to love you for that. Mm-hmm. Obviously, you know, I've got no problem calling Steve Loretta and saying she. That's, for me, that's courtesy.
Yep.
But have we crossed the Rubicon now? Has trans ideology taken root in Western society? Is there any rowing back from this?
I think there is. I think we're starting to see a pushback now because people have got to a point where women are getting very upset with biological men, women winning their prizes in sports. Mm-hmm. We're also seeing, you know, women's spaces being invaded when you have women's rights activists speaking, like Professor Kathleen Stock or Posey Parker, Kelly Jane. You know, they're getting attacked or they're getting kind of angry trans activists turn up. And of course, this is a very small minority of this particular group. You know, these are the activists, just like any group you have, you know, Just Stop Oil people and stuff. They're the extreme elements. But they're the ones carrying the banners for the LGBT movement. And I think it's really harmful to the LGBT people, you know, the people that have had to fight for their rights for so long. And indeed, it's harmful to actual trans people that have had to struggle their whole life with gender dysphoria. So I think these activists are the real issue.
And this is the point, that the so-called gender ideology, which essentially says a man is a woman and vice versa, rather than respecting the way by which someone identifies, important difference, it's obviously very full. It doesn't really help the trans community, in fact.
You know, it's very damaging to the trans community because, you know, until the last few years, they were just happily living their lives with no problems. Nobody was even discussing them because of their identity. And it's really sad. You know, I have trans friends. I'm a spokesperson for Caitlyn Jenner's organisation, Fairness First. I have many trans friends, and they're saying it's really difficult for them right now because of these trans activists and all these non-binary activists that have really hijacked their movement. So, you know, we need fairness. We need to respect people, of course, but we also have to bring all people into the conversation. Women need to speak, trans people need to speak, LGBT people. Everybody should have a dialogue instead of having these people, you know, these trans activists screaming at women, trying to take away their rights. Let's have a conversation. Let's try and solve this so everybody is happy.
You've won this award, WIBA, what for?
So I actually won this at the Cannes Film Festival recently. I won it alongside Elon Musk's mother, May. And it was a great honour because this was actually for my social media advocacy. And I've been working very hard. You know, I've dedicated my entire life really for helping people, for helping women, for helping kids. So it was really nice to be recognised for this and to win an award with such distinguished people like May Musk. So I feel very blessed. And I actually dedicated this award in my speech to all women around the world.
Ollie, thank you for joining us in the studio. We'll catch up really soon.
Thank you. A real
Remarkable
pleasure.
Ollie London. Fascinating stuff. Next up, I'll be speaking to a 34-year-old man who has incurable bowel cancer, all because the NHS turned into a COVID-only service during the pandemic. He tells his story next. At 9 o'clock, I'll be dealing with the woke nationwide. And at 10, Phillip Schofield. A busy couple of hours to come. See you in 2.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it. So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better.
Crop failures, famine, war, suffering on a scale completely unimaginable.
We are putting the cart before the horse. As Charles I said at the scaffold, he was the true defender of liberty.
Yeah, I've completely derailed the conversation.
Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Now, the excellent Daily Telegraph columnist Alison Pearson has drawn attention to the shocking story of Jon Chapple, somebody whose treatment for what was believed to be a fairly straightforward lump in his bowel was delayed and ignored during COVID. After 2 years of wrong diagnoses, cancelled appointments and missed opportunities to deal with the disease before it became life-threatening, Jon is one of the many thousands of people who are victims of the government's pandemic response and the NHS's seeming decision to become a COVID-only service. Jon has been told the cancer is incurable, but is now seeking access to life-saving cancer treatment in Germany. Folk can help via a special website, which we'll quote in a moment. But Jon, welcome to the show.
Hi, Mark. Thanks for having me on.
It's really, really humbling to have you on the programme. It's very important that your story is told. In your article, the one that you featured in, written by Alison Pearson, you said that although you were fobbed off by doctors, you trusted the NHS. That was your big mistake. Tell me more.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think in this country we're certainly brought up to we look up to the NHS, and I think we're brought up to instinctively trust doctors, and that they have our best interests at heart, and they are they'll take care of us and won't let things get too out of control. But obviously that wasn't the case with me. So yeah, unfortunately, I think I was a bit naive, and I've realised the importance of advocating for yourself and making a fuss, and not being polite, and just really advocating for yourself, basically.
Yes, and you've said that it's anger that now drives you to tell your story and, of course, to seek treatment.
Yeah, I mean, that's basically it. I mean, I think it would be very easy when somebody has a diagnosis like this. I mean, obviously, it's devastating and traumatic for me to deal with, and also for all my family, friends, everyone around me. So I think it would be easy to, curl up in a corner and give up, just go away, and but I think I've got a real determination to carry on fighting this thing as much as I can, and certainly anger at the situation and how things were dealt with is definitely a driving force.
Definitely, the many missed opportunities are truly appalling and not a good reflection on the service. You had an operation, but after the cancer returned, it seems you felt that even then the NHS were quite unsympathetic, like you were a problem that needed to go away.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not... I don't want to be too critical of my... I think I have been cared for quite well since they actually discovered the cancer. I feel like they've given up on me perhaps a little bit now because, as you say, the cancer grew back and it's quite aggressive. And I was basically told it's now unlikely I'll ever be cured. But I think my main takeaway from this is that the NHS is quite good at being reactive, and when you're diagnosed with something serious, it does spring into action relatively fast in my experience, but it didn't need to get to this point. It's not good at being proactive, and it's not good at preventing diseases or getting things sorted before they actually get too serious. It's been my experience.
Do you feel, Jon, that something happened to the NHS within its culture during the pandemic, that as an organisation, groupthink kicked in and it became disproportionately obsessed with one virus?
I would say so. I think it's difficult not to draw that conclusion now. I think, obviously, it wasn't an easy time. Nobody knew how serious the virus was going to be when it first came out. But I think as soon as it became clear that it mainly killed, the elderly, people who are immunosuppressed, there was a very small percentage of people it was a serious illness for, and it presented no risk to most people. I think it was... I think a lot of people probably think the same. I think it was a huge overreaction, and it seemed fairly obvious to me at the time. I remember saying in March 2020 that I think these lockdowns are going to kill more people than they saved, and I don't take any pleasure in being proven right on that, especially. And I obviously didn't expect to be one of the people in this position, but I think. Yeah, absolutely. I'd agree with you on that front.
I want to talk about the treatment that you're seeking in Germany, and you can tell our viewers how they can engage with that particular campaign of yours. How are you feeling at the moment, Jon, on a day-to-day basis? Your physical and your mental health. How are you doing?
It's basically where I am currently is that the chemo that I'm on is keeping everything. They call it stable disease at the moment, so it's not growing anymore. It's not shrinking anymore. It's kind of on a certain level, but I have chemo on a fortnightly cycle. Probably out of every 2 weeks, I feel okay for maybe 2 or 3 days. So it's keeping me alive. It's prolonging my life, this treatment I'm currently having, but it's not a treatment which is going to cure me. And it's also not a life that I try and take my moments where I can and try and make the most of when I'm feeling okay, and, see friends and go out and all that sort of stuff. But the vast majority of my time, I feel sick and in pain. All the horrible side effects that go with, what is essentially a toxic, a poison that's going into your bloodstream. So it is, it's working sort of, but it definitely comes at the expense of, just being comfortable and not in pain, and just generally feeling okay.
And what about your spirit, your mental health? How are you feeling? That must fluctuate too.
Yeah, absolutely. It fluctuates. I think every knockback we get, every bit of disappointment, every news from a doctor that isn't necessarily positive, I think it takes me a little while to recover from that. Probably, a few days, I'll sort of go into a bit of a depression afterwards and then bounce back. So I think it's very up and down, as you'd expect, I think. But right now, I'm feeling more positive than I was. Obviously, you mentioned that I've been doing this fundraising. Alison Pearson obviously wrote that. She wrote a lovely article, and I went on her podcast too, and that helped raise a lot of awareness and a lot of money to help fundraise these treatments. So I'm feeling relatively positive at the moment.
Well, there you are. There's your handsome face on the GoFundMe page. Tell my viewers and listeners how they can contribute should they so wish.
So it's a GoFundMe link, which I believe you should be able to share. What I'm raising money for, it's experimental treatment, which I think will eventually become a standard cancer treatment. It's basically vaccine based. They take your blood, they segment it, they look for all of your mutations and markers and that kind of stuff, and then they make a specialized vaccine, this personalized treatment based on your cancer specifically. I found out about it through someone else I met in chemotherapy who's got the same diagnosis as me, stage 4 bowel cancer that spread to the liver. She's only 30, I'm 34. I think she's 37. So another person's far too young and has really been let down by the system. But she's found out about this stuff. She's currently having it. She's waiting to see whether it's working in her body, but before they do it, they have it in vitro in a Petri dish. They put her cancer in there, they put this vaccine in there, and it did start attacking the cancer. It worked as it was supposed to. So it's early and it's experimental, and obviously not available on the NHS and not even available in this country. But I feel like at this point I don't really have much. At this point, my choices are accepting indefinite chemotherapy until it stops working, or to try something drastic. And people have given very generously, and I've been overwhelmed by the support for the second option. So for people that are not brilliant on the internet, what do they do? They go to GoFundMe, and then what do they do? What do they type in? I believe if you probably Google my name and GoFundMe, it should come up. There is a specific link.
I think that's right. I looked earlier and I just put Jon in, Jon, and it came up. So Jon Chapple, Chapple, Jon Chapple, GoFundMe. I'm pretty confident that my viewers and listeners will help move the dial. I'll certainly be chipping in straight after the show. Jon, it's so good to have you on the show. More power to you. It's important that you've told your story, and also all my hope and prayers for this treatment to actually really help. Quick shout out to your missus, your lovely missus, childhood sweetheart. She's written about in the article, Nikki. How's Nikki doing?
She's okay. I mean, she's a pillar of strength for me at the moment. She obviously, with how I'm feeling, I can't often do housework. I can't cook. Sometimes I can barely even wash myself. So unfortunately for her, she's ended up in her early 30s becoming almost like a part-time carer, but she's dealt with it with grace and good humour and the love that has always characterised our relationship. I mean, she's been an angel, really. So, I mean, I know it's difficult for her because cancer doesn't just affect the person; it affects everyone. But yeah, she's wonderful.
Well, listen, she's a lucky lady too. What a guy. A privilege to have you on the show. I do hope you'll join us again to let us know how you're getting on with that new treatment. And as I say, I know that my viewers and listeners are rooting for you, Jon.
Thank you. Thanks a lot, Mark.
There you go, Jon Chapple. What a story. We've reached out to the NHS Trust in question for comment, but as yet have not received a statement. Next up in Dial Dolan, in which I'm taking your video calls, is Phillip Schofield, the victim of a witch hunt. Plus, I'll be dealing with the woke nationwide in my big opinion at 9. And Schofield at 10. It's a busy show. See you in 2.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed. So I guess they've always been quite woke. That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat.
Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Well, it's time now for Dial Dolan, in which I take your video calls. And this evening, amid the fallout from Phillip Schofield's departure from ITV, several public figures, including former BBC presenter Richard Bacon, have said it's time to stop piling on this human being. Meanwhile, the mother of TV presenter Caroline Flack, who tragically took her life amid media pressure, has told the BBC's Newsnight that ITV have not learned from their mistakes. So is the criticism towards Schofield now too harsh? Is there a witch hunt against the former This Morning presenter? Let's get the views of Alan in Grimsby, Sue in Cheshire and John in Birmingham. First of all, Alan in Grimsby, a warm welcome to Mark Dolan tonight, a welcome newbie. What's your reaction to this story?
Good evening, Mark. I don't think there's any kind of witch hunt against Schofield at all. He's a fourth-rate celebrity who's probably quite well known on the TV. And it's probably right, given what's happened, that the focus is on him. But I don't think there's any witch hunt against him at all.
He's argued, Alan, that this is homophobic. If he was a straight man, this wouldn't be a story. Do you share that view, Alan?
No, Mark, I don't. I think that's absolute nonsense. What I've seen of his interviews and his explanation of it would seem to be him trying to justify or make himself out to be a victim. The victims in this are his wife, his children, and the people who were actually on the set working with them. And if the stories that have come out about him and his behaviour on set and what kind of prima donna he was, or anything to go by, I imagine there's quite a few people who will be quite happy to see him fall. But do I think it's homophobic? Do I think there's a witch hunt against him? Absolutely not. He's probably getting the right level of attention that he needs.
Well, I'm delighted to welcome another brand new star to Mark Dolan tonight, and that's Jon in England's second city of Birmingham. Jon, what do you think? Do you worry for Schofield's mental health? He hinted that he considered suicide when all of this blew up. Should we worry about that?
Good evening, Mark. I think we should worry slightly because obviously Phillip has been living with the day-to-day worry and torment of whether this story would be exposed. And now it has. He's obviously dealing with a tremendous amount of pressure. And we have to remember he's lost his job, which he had a daily routine. He's lost his friendships. And it's very easy to go into a dark place when you're having such amount of scrutiny put on you. I'm not condoning some of the unwise mistakes he's made, but I do think it is a tremendous amount of pressure. And I remember the sad story about Caroline Flack, and obviously we don't want to read in a few weeks' time that Phillip had done something untoward, because it's so easy to slip into a very dark hole. But I do feel ITV senior management, although he's now not working with them, but I think they still have a duty of care towards him. And although he's made mistakes, yes, but I think they still should be making sure he's got the right care around him to keep him on the right road.
Let's now go to a Mark Dolan Tonight legend, Sue in Cheshire. Sue, do you have sympathy for Phillip Schofield?
I'm a bit torn, actually, Mark, because I think having a young man as a lover, as long as what they've said about it is true, that A, he was in his early 20s, second, that it was consensual, I don't see a problem with that. A lot of older gay men take a lot younger men as their lovers and partners. And, you know, shock horror, a man who's having an affair tells lies about it. That's not unusual either. However, I do think that the onus in this Rory really is on the management of ITV. I can't believe that they didn't know what was going on, given that this young man was in such prominent positions in all these dues that were going on, like the awards ceremony, when no other runner has ever been there at all. And obviously Schofield was pushing that. They seem to have completely bypassed their duty of care to the young man in any case. And I think that there needs to be an investigation, not only into the toxic views, especially the way they appear to have treated some of their guests on the show, both him and Holly, and the management and other people. They need to look into investigate the sort of toxic culture there, and also clarify whether this culture is only in this one programme, and whether it's, throughout the whole of ITV as well.
Sue, has this changed your view of ITV?
To be honest, I've never watched ITV for the last 30 years. And
why not?
Nope. I haven't. And since GBNews came about, I've not watched the BBC except for the repair shop.
Well, yeah, that's probably one of their better programmes. Interesting stuff. Jon, what do you think about the future of This Morning? Can it go on?
It's very difficult to say, Mark, isn't it? I mean, I was just thinking, I remember when Phillip came out as admitting he was gay on This Morning, and instead of that being a joyous and happy occasion, it felt really traumatic and almost like a bereavement. And I think the people that he should have had in the studio with him was his wife and 2 daughters. I don't know whether there was something going to be exposed about him, which is why he felt he needed to do that. But I do think the existing presenters, Alison Hammond, is really great. I don't know how the situation is for Holly Willoughby, unfortunately. Being so close to Philip, people speculate that she knows a lot more than she's saying. But I think the most important thing is when people watch these programmes, they want to believe that the people are real. And when I've ever watched this programme, I've always felt that it is real. But then you realise, well, actually, are people being genuine? And when are they being fake? I'm sure you're being perfectly genuine tonight, Mark. But that's what people want. They want honesty. And I think it's such a shame, really. If Philip had have been open and honest in the beginning, things may have not come back to sort of haunt him in this way. But I think the programme can survive, but I think there needs to be changes to make it refreshed and a new vibrant start.
Well, Jon, let me tell you that I will always be straight and honest with my viewers and listeners. I messed up the intro to the show. Producer Greg's furious with me, let me tell you, yelling down my ear. Last word to Alan in Grimsby. Alan, briefly, if you can, what about Holly Willoughby? Do you believe her protestations that she knew nothing of this affair?
I don't know a lot about them, Mark, but to be quite honest, no, I don't. I don't think she could be that close to someone for all those years and not have a real insight into what was actually going on. So that's for her to deal with, I think, in the coming months. I don't have a lot of time for either of them, to be quite honest, or for ITV.
Well, there you go. Well, look, keep watching GB News instead, Alan. And, of course, it's a wonderful Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce at 9:30 every weekday morning. We got the results of a People's poll on Mark Dolan tonight. Is this a witch hunt against Phillip Schofield? 26% say yes, but over 73% say no. Now at 10, I'll be dealing with Phillip Schofield, hopefully my final comment on this saga. But next up, in my big opinion, I'll be dealing with woke nationwide. Find out why after this.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me. So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
I'm Andrew Doyle.
Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by headliners on TV, radio and online. This is GB News. Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's 9 o'clock on television, on radio and online in the United Kingdom and across the world. This is Mark Dolan Tonight. In my take at 10, following his bombshell interview with the Sun newspaper, I'm not buying Phillip Schofield's crocodile tears. In my big opinion, as Nationwide insult female customers with their latest Pride video, featuring a man dressed up as a woman, it's time for woke companies to stay out of politics. And my Mark Meets guest is a man who has done just about everything in broadcasting. Radio and TV legend, top of the pops, you name it, Radio 1, Mike Reid. And at 10 o'clock, I will be dealing with Phillip Schofield. You won't want to miss it. But Woke Nationwide next after the headlines with Bethany Elsey.
Mark, thank you. Here's your top stories from the GB newsroom. Boris Johnson says he sent all unredacted WhatsApp messages directly to the COVID inquiry, bypassing the Cabinet Office. The former Prime Minister told the inquiry chair he would like to do the same with messages on an old phone that's locked due to security concerns. It has discussions on it from before May 2021. It's after the inquiry announced it's bringing a legal challenge against the Cabinet Office after it missed yesterday's deadline to hand over all Mr. Johnson's messages and diaries. A 19-year-old has been sentenced to life in prison with a minimum term of 6 years after pleading guilty to planning terror attacks on the police and military. Matthew King from Essex converted to Islam and became radicalised during the COVID lockdown. The judge praised his mother, who reported him to the Prevent Counter-Terrorism programme, saying it couldn't have been easy, but was absolutely the right thing. At least 50 people have been killed and 350 hospitalised after 2 passenger trains collided in India. The Coromandel Express, which runs from Kolkata to Chennai, crashed into the Howrah Superfast Express in the eastern state of Odisha. Videos show people climbing over the toppled carriages as the injured were carried to ambulances. Officials say the number of fatalities is expected to rise. 20 people have now been arrested in relation to the riots that followed a crash in which 2 teenagers were killed in Cardiff. The deaths of Kyrie Sullivan and Harvey Evans, who were 16 and 15, sparked violence and disorder on the streets of Ely after claims they were pursued by police. CCTV shows the boys on an electric bike being followed by a police van. 15 officers were injured in the riots. Phillip Schofield says he's lost everything after revelations of his affair with a younger male colleague at This Morning. The 61-year-old resigned from ITV last week after admitting to the affair and says he'll comply with an external review commissioned by the broadcaster. Schofield has hit out at what he described as relentless criticism and told the BBC he feels ashamed and sorry, but insists he didn't groom him.
Was a completely innocent backwards and forwards over a period of time about a job, about careers. You know, I mean, you do that. What's wrong with that? What was unwise was the fact that it happened, and that was a very, very grave error. Now, it was consensual, but it was my fault.
And more disruption for holidaymakers as security guards at Heathrow Airport announce further strike action this summer. Unite, the union, says its members will stage 33 days of industrial action in a dispute over pay. The walkouts will take place almost every weekend from mid-June to the end of August. You're up to date on TV, online, DAB+ radio and on TuneIn. This is GB News. Now it's back to Mark.
Thanks, Bethany. Welcome to Mark Dolan Tonight. In my big opinion, as Nationwide insult female customers with their latest Pride video featuring a man dressed up as a woman, it's time for woke companies to stay out of politics. In the big story, as Keir Starmer says he will not explore future gas and oil licences, I'm asking, is climate change a scam? My Mark Meets guest is a man who's done just about everything in broadcasting. Radio and TV legend Mike Reid, Top of the Pops, Radio 1, he's done it all. In my take at 10, following his bombshell interview with the Sun newspaper and the BBC, I'm not buying Phillip Schofield's crocodile tears. My reaction to this saga after 10. Tonight's newsmaker is the fearless TV star Kim Woodburn, who'll be dropping some more truth bombs about the Schofield situation. Mark Dolan Tonight is the home of the papers, with tomorrow's front pages at exactly 10:30 sharp, with three top pundits who haven't been told what to say and who most certainly don't follow the script. This show's real. It's uncensored, it's uncancelled, it's wild. And helping me deliver a lively and punchy show tonight, Lisa McKenzie, Lizzie Zeta and Mike Parry. Tonight I'll be asking the pundits, is it the fire service's job to move obese people? Should people be fined for feeding ducks? And given that they sneak out for so many ciggies, I should say, given they sneak out for cigarette breaks, should smokers be forced to work overtime? We'll debate all of that with my pundits shortly, plus your emails, especially the spicy ones, mark@gbnews.com. This programme has a golden rule. We don't do boring, not on my watch. I just won't have it. So a busy 2 hours to come. Schofield at 10. But first, my big opinion. Here we go again. Yet another company, this time Nationwide, going down the woke rabbit hole with a bizarre video featuring one of their bank workers parading in drag. This is all to celebrate the month-long Pride Festival. And I'll be the first to celebrate the choices that anyone has made in life. Who they choose to fall in love with, how they identify. Good luck to you. It's a wonderful thing. It's a free country. But what I don't enjoy is the broader messaging from the likes of Nationwide. If they don't know the implications of blindly backing these campaigns, they're stupid. And if they do know, then they are frankly sinister. Because what's happening here is a war on the very idea of gender itself. Aspects of the Pride movement and that divisive rainbow flag, which many gay people feel does not represent them, supports the idea that you can literally change your biological sex, that a man is a woman, that a woman is a man. It's an ideology which tells little boys and little girls at school that they can choose their own pronouns and that they may be trapped in the wrong body. Why do Nationwide Bank want to endorse that message? And how do their customers feel about that message? Especially female customers. Quick reminder, that is half of the population. Female customers who feel cancelled by so-called trans ideology and who are increasingly losing their female-only spaces. Ladies' toilets, women's dressing rooms, even women's prisons and rape crisis centres are no longer the exclusive domain of biological females. Women are rightly angry about that, as they are about being called people with ovaries, cis women, humans with a cervix, or even chest feeders. Are Nationwide happy to endorse this erasing of women? Do women not have bank accounts and loans and mortgages? Well, I think the likes of Nationwide are mortgaging their own future with this divisive woke nonsense. What is it, their business, getting involved in these cultural matters? Their job is to lend money to people at great expense to us and generating great wealth for them. Stay in your lane, chaps. Or is it chapesses or they chaps, them, who knows? It's like our police officers dancing and wearing flags at pride marches. It's not their job to make the world a better, fluffier place. They're the police. It's their job to make the world a safer place, but they seem to have forgotten that. What about the drinks company Innocent this week? They make smoothies, of course. They claim to be ultra woke, even though they are 90% owned by the global corporate giant Coca-Cola. How does that square? They put out a series of tweets this week, Innocent, basically an Orwellian language guide advising customers what words we can and cannot use in relation to those who transition. This is a smoothie company beating us into a pulp with all of their PC nonsense. Bizarrely, they referred to the mermaid charity as Legends, even though this highly controversial organisation was exposed by The Telegraph last year for sending chest-flattening devices to teenage girls without parental knowledge. And it's a charity which encourages the prescribing of puberty blockers. This is medication to stop puberty for young people. Innocent smoothies there with a not-so-innocent message. Well, they went on to say, we're always looking for ways to be more inclusive. So we asked mermaids to teach us what's okay to say. Welcome to hell. And here's how pathetic these companies are. Innocent have now deleted the tweets after an enormous public backlash, demonstrating that these corporations have no morals, no ethics, and no backbone. It's all virtue signalling, it's all fake, it's all pretend. They couldn't care less about your human rights. They're just trying to sell more of their sugar-laden products. Yes, I know they're fruit smoothies, but fructose is effectively the same thing, let me tell you. This hot on the heels of Ben & Jerry's ice cream, manufacturers of a sickly, calorific slurry that makes our kids fat, lecturing the Home Secretary on Britain's immigration policy. Or how about Halifax, telling one of their customers that if they don't like their employees' pronoun badges, which are, if you think about it, effectively compelled speech, they can get an account somewhere else. Charming. Well, as we've seen with Bud Light, who went woke by employing a trans woman who mocked actual women, or US retail giant Target, who have been making swimsuits for kids that you can tuck your bollocks into, the expression go woke, go broke has never been truer. They have lost billions, and I couldn't be happier. The public will take their business elsewhere, and these corporations will eventually learn their lesson. People are sick to the back teeth of this woke crap, and the likes of Nationwide are hastening their own demise if they persist with it. What a load of bankers. OK, folks, what's your reaction? Mark at gbnews.uk. The likes of Innocent would argue that they simply want to create an inclusive world. They would argue that they've got thousands of customers. Some are trans. They would argue that trans people are among the most victimised in our society. All they want is equality for all, they would argue. Not my view, but what's yours? Mark at gbnews.com. Reacting to my big opinion, my top pundits tonight, author and academic Dr. Lisa Mackenzie, journalist and commentator Lizzie Zita, and radio and TV broadcaster, Fleet Street legend, let's be honest, let's have it right, Mike Porky Parry. Folks, let's get our teeth straight into this. Lizzie Zita, your reaction to Nationwide's latest promotional video.
Well, I couldn't help but thinking, look, I worked in fashion and advertising for quite a long time. This idea and this concept was made possibly about a year to 8 months ago. And then it all starts, that everything gets passed off until we see what we saw today. And I'm afraid that public opinion has really turned against this nonsense. Look, I'm a woman. It's taken us 5,000 years to get to this point where we're not even equal. and people are coming into our spaces. I went to the Hammersmith. I was telling my lovely friend Lisa here that I went to Hammersmith Lyric Theatre, went to the loo, the male and female.
Horrible
loo.
unisex toilet.
Yeah. Walked in, urinals all the way down one side. You had to walk past them to get to the
And that
toilets.
would be blokes with their willies out.
Well, and I've got to take taking a child in there, you cannot do it. The world's gone nuts. Everybody, yes, we need to respect everybody, but we need spaces between us. We need to be together, but with spaces between us. I just think the world has gone crazy. And they need to concentrate on getting people to answer the phone, to manage the money, not getting into this whole political business. It's absolute nonsense. And it also, that whole big trans look, I mean, I know it's a great big laugh and we laugh about it, etc., but it does ridicule women. It does.
How so?
Don't, because gay men and women do not look like that. They look like us. They look like me, they look like you. They don't have to exaggerate or great big boobs, loads of makeup, loads of hair. It's like a parody.
It's Danny LaRue, wasn't it?
Absolutely. It's not right.
Lisa, Innocent and Nationwide would argue that they are bravely fighting transphobia, which is now taking root in our society. They're doing the right thing.
I think people can see through this. I mean, I have no problem at all with, I saw the Nationwide advert, it looks like they're cashing in on the RuPaul's Drag Race. That's what that looks like to me. RuPaul's Drag Race has been so successful.
Which is a brilliant show.
Yeah, which is so successful all over the world. And people are cashing in on that. They're going, drag is money. So I think that's what it is. But I think people now can see that these big companies, I mean, Coca-Cola owns Innocent.
And Innocent are pretending to be this woke independent
and
company.
it's disingenuous.
One of the biggest pollutants in the world, Coca-Cola.
Yeah, and it's disingenuous, and I think whenever they try and sort of stray, these big multinational companies start to stray into politics and activism, what it's doing, it's actually removing the politics and the activism out of the genuine gripes.
Well, Mike, perhaps they've judged that the public love these campaigns.
I try to look up the figures, and the most accurate one I can get is that the trans community, not just in this country but worldwide, is 0.2% of the population. So why on earth is so much time, trouble, effort, money and persuasion put into trying to accommodate and help the feelings of 0.2% of the population?
There are more Everton fans than there are trans people in this country.
There are.
Including your good self.
There are, absolutely. Now, I'm not for a moment saying that we should ignore trans and all that. These people have an issue in life. They need recognition. They want to be treated fairly, and we all respect that. But the amount of persuasion they now exercise in society is utterly ludicrous. For instance, I would say they get the drop on terms of time and attention and money and influence over people who've got cancer. And there's a lot more people in our society who've got cancer than are trans.
Would you say, though, that perhaps it's not trans people who are doing this? It's not trans people who are pushing this, is it?
Well,
they are influencing it, aren't they?
But it's a bit like the Labour Party, and it's an extremist rump who are leading the conversation.
I also think it's very fashionable. And I think it's very fashionable for young people to show their politics in a particular way. And I've got to say, I work in a university, and on university campuses, and usually the more sort of wealthy Russell Group campuses, this sort of stuff is very fashionable. It's kind of the new... What did it used to be? Palestine. It used to be, or South Africa. And it's kind of the new...
Or the poster of
Che Guevara,
yes. I think it is. Anywhere where there is trouble, you've got the extreme left stirring and stirring, and they're there all the time. I loathe them.
Shaping the national conversation.
Because people have a genuine argument to make, they have a genuine point to make, and you get these extreme groups that come in and ruin it for everybody.
OK. All right, well, look, coming up next, we'll be speaking to a top author. Keir Starmer wants to get rid of those gas and oil licences in the North Sea. Is climate change a scam? We'll get the answer to that. Plus, should woke corporations stay out of politics? The results of our text poll next.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, nah, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different. Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it. So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better.
Crop failures, famine, war, suffering on a scale completely unimaginable.
We are putting the cart before the horse. As Charles I said at the scaffold, he was the true defender of liberty.
Yeah, I've completely derailed the conversation.
Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
The Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Nationwide have alienated many of their customers with a campaign video on Twitter supporting Pride with a drag act. However, Stephanie says, I've got no problem with what Nationwide are trying to do. They want to include all of their customers and be a bit more understanding. Glenda says, Mark, I opened an account with Nationwide last week. I wish I hadn't bothered. It's only for 12 months and then I shall close it. Stephen, Mark, there are more men identifying as women to get into women's spaces than there are women identifying as men and trying to get into men's spaces. Well, Stephen, anecdotally, that would seem to be true. I wonder what's behind that. We can ponder, can't we? Mike says, Mark, it goes beyond what your guests are talking about. They talk of cashing in and being fashionable. However, the more sinister view and more accurate reason for this push of trans activism is due to the destabilisation of the West and a Marxist agenda in collaboration with globalism. If you or your guests can't see this, then we are truly lost. Betty, I've been with Nationwide for 30 years. I think it's ridiculous the way large companies advertise themselves. Women are women and men are men. Betty, thank you for your no-nonsense email. And this from Chris, last but not least. Chris says, hi, Mark. I'd say these woke companies are creating transphobia. We never cared who dressed as what. Live and let live. Now it's shoved down your throat and people are pissed off at being told how bad they are and what to think. I will not pretend for anyone in terms of pronouns. Pronouns my arse, says Chris, not pulling his punches. Well, we asked on Twitter, should woke companies stay out of politics? 90% said yes, 10% said no. And it's time now for the big story. Critics of the new live-action version of Disney's Little Mermaid have been labelled racist, with the IMDb film review website upgrading scores for the film, featuring the flurry of one-star reviews. Apparently, that might have been because the lead character was played by a black actress. So are critics of the movie horribly racist, or is it just a bad film? With woke hysteria surrounding almost every production these days, is political correctness destroying the entertainment industry? Who better to ask than the brilliant Times columnist and long-standing theatre critic, thank God he's never reviewed me, Quentin Lett. Hi, Quentin.
Hello, Mark. I might have to.
I look forward to a damning review in tomorrow's Times. Quentin, first of all, your reaction to this accusation that perhaps critics of The Little Mermaid live-action remake are racist?
A bit peculiar to get het up about Halle Berry playing a mermaid being the wrong colour somehow, because between you and me, I don't know if we can say this early hour, mermaids don't exist. It's a strange thing to consider that people might get het up about that. It's quite possible that it's just a terrible film.
It quite possibly indeed is. Do you think critics are now nervous about criticising productions that contain a diverse cast, that if they're critical, they'll get labelled this or that?
They undoubtedly are. Some of my, I can tell you, some of my fellow theatre critics on Fleet Street papers, they tell me that they will not dare criticise certain aspects of plays, productions. Now, what we're not saying here, Mark, we're not saying that theatre cannot be political. Theatre has been political since ancient Greek comedy, and some modern productions, if you think about The Crucible, Arthur Miller's The Crucible, fantastically political and really telling about modern youth, actually, and the frenzy of wokery in modern youth. So theatre should be and can be political. However, what troubles people and troubles audiences, I think, is when the casting becomes so thuddingly wokist that it gets in the way of the suspension of disbelief. Theatre operates. The deal is that you go in and you suspend your disbelief and you believe that the story that's going on is real and the characters are real. And it becomes a problem if something interferes with that. And a lot of modern casting does get in the way of that, either by being gender blind or colour blind or disability blind or weightist blind. And last summer, we had a musical in an open-air theatre in London where they were a weight-blind cast. So they cast, between you and me, a bunch of heffalumps as the chorus line. And it became ludicrous because the set started bouncing up and down as they were doing their big musical numbers. And I was the only critic to point out the absurdity of this. Everyone else said how wonderful, a lot of the other critics said how wonderful it was that a musical was being cast with, I can't remember what the correct term is, but basically porkers playing the chorus line. And I say this as one who with a certain amount of avoirdupois himself, so before your viewers point that out. So there is certainly a state recently, although I think it's improving, that critics have felt unable to say things about certain productions. The Royal Shakespeare Company, state-subsidised, is among the worst of the wokies. And they had a Julius Caesar recently where Brutus was played by a woman, which is, okay, that's it's an interesting modern interpretation, if you like. But then you come to Mark Antony's line, but Brutus is an honourable man. And we had that being forced down our throats, and Brutus plainly wasn't a bloke. It should have been Brutus is an honourable ma'am, maybe, but they didn't do that. And the whole thing, we had a non-binary soothsayer in that one as well, I think. And it is everywhere. It's been particularly prevalent in the subsidised sector. But, and this is where I can bring your viewers some comfort. I've detected since the end of lockdown, there's been a certain pushback because I think theatres have realised they've got to earn some money again. And so the National Theatre, which was previously pretty wokey, has now dropped a lot of that and is concentrating on box office again. So I think we have peaked.
Quentin, I always love reading you in the Times. I look forward to my one-star review in tomorrow's paper.
Bye.
If I'm lucky. The brilliant Quentin Letts. What a guy, what a character. I've got to say, a thrill to have him on the show. Let's get him back, Greg. There's a keeper for you. Lots more to come, folks, including my top pundits. And I've got some juicy questions for them. But first up, let's talk about the environment. Yes, indeed. Labour leader Keir Starmer has said he will not grant any future gas or oil exploration licences when he becomes Prime Minister. So is the pursuit of net zero now inevitable, whichever government is in charge? Is the science around global warming now settled? Or is climate change a scam? I'll bring you the results of our text poll on that shortly, but let's speak to the author of a brand new book that's getting the country talking. It's on that subject. It's by Ross Clark, and it's called Not Zero. And Ross Clark joins us now. Hi, Ross.
Good evening. Hi.
Well, there you go. Is climate change a scam?
Well, no, it's not a scam. It's not a hoax. There is evidence that the globe is getting warmer, and that's very likely to do with a lot to do with man-made influence, even if we can't quite prove it. But what we do have is a hysteria around climate change now, where I keep reading that we're heading for an unlivable Earth when we get to 1.5% Celsius above pre-industrial level temperatures. Well, we're about to 1.1 now, and the parts of the world already 1.5% Celsius above the levels that were in the mid-19th century, and the world hasn't come to an end. I keep seeing, John Kerry, the US climate envoy, keeps going around saying that 10 million people a year are being killed by the heat. That's complete rubbish. He's come from a misquote of an Australian study 2 years ago, which found that 5 million people a year die from extreme temperatures, and 9/10 of them are from extreme cold temperatures. And while the number of people dying from extreme heat is rising a little bit, the number of people dying from extreme cold is falling even more. So actually, if you want to attribute deaths to climate change, actually, climate change you would say was saving lives at the moment. So it's just got to an absurd stage where this sort of hysteria just feeds off itself. But we've now got sort of school kids who really think that the world's going to come to an end, and they're not going to reach adulthood because we're all going to be killed by climate change. And it's rather serious traumatization that they've gone through. And so no, climate change is real, but it's not the sort of threat to humans which is made out to be by so many people.
Although perhaps, Ross, some would argue it will be eventually. Why should we wait around? The cost of dealing with a crisis will be far higher if we ignore it. It's very clear that the majority of mainstream scientists do believe there's a problem and believe we need net zero. How can that many people be wrong?
Well, I'm not saying they are wrong. I mean, it certainly is right that we move to cleaner energy. We try to cut carbon emissions, maybe one day eliminate them. But, you've got to balance the dangers against the, not having an economy. And if you try and sort of change to drop all net carbon emissions by 2025, which Extinction Rebellion seems to want to do, well, you won't have an economy left. You've got far more people being sort of killed by hunger and disease and everything else than would be killed by any climate change. It's a question of balance. And at the moment, we've just got this sort of obsession with getting to net zero by 2050, this sort of arbitrary date, and it seems to be riding roughshod over all other considerations, food, wealth, and rich countries can cope with climatic extremes, extreme weathers. Poor countries can't cope with natural disasters, and so if you impoverish people, we'll end up with far more people in trouble than we will otherwise.
Ross, good to have you back on the show. Ross Clark is the author of Not Zero. It is the book that's getting Britain talking. It's out now. Coming up next with the pundits, is it the fire service's job to move obese people? Should people be fined for feeding ducks? And given that they sneak out for so many ciggies, should smokers be forced to work overtime? And don't forget, at 10 o'clock, I'll be dealing with Phillip Schofield. All of that to come. See you in 2.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prisons?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Is climate change a scam? I've been asking you on email. Peter says the so-called expertise on human-caused climate change is driven by money. Influential politicians have decided this is the way and provide grants for those who support their ideas. Unsurprisingly, academics seeking funding fall in line. Andrew, Mark, climate changes, full stop. We humans can't stop or start it. Bring back the vineyards in Northumberland as in the Middle Ages. Thank you, Andy. That would be a plus point for climate change, wouldn't it? More English wine. Bring it on. Cheers, one and all. Now, we've been asking you online, is climate change a scam? The results are in. 21.4% say no, but a whacking majority of 78.6% say yes, it is. Now, let me just be very clear. Back to me, Greg, if you don't mind, and young Jonathan. That's the vast majority of mainstream scientists around the world, top experts, do believe that the planet is dangerously overheating. It will produce mass migration, big problems for the West, and it must be tackled. So, look, that's majority science, but we hear from all sides on this show, so keep your opinions coming. Mark at gbnews.uk. Reacting to the big stories of the day, my top pundits with ringside seats for the big topics. Dr. Lisa Mackenzie, the only qualified person in the building at the moment, author and academic. Journalist and commentator, the fabulous Lizzie Zeta, and a titan of broadcasting, Fleet Street legend Mike Porky Parry. Now, fire crews are dealing with calls to help physically move obese people once every 4 hours. These cases, known as bariatric rescues, are linked, not surprisingly, to a rise in obesity. So is it the fire service's job to move obese people? Mike?
The problem with obesity is it permeates right throughout society. For instance, we're now having to build ambulances, which are bigger than they used to be, with more suspension, because the people you put in the back are so fat. Did you know that at crematoriums, we're having to build bigger ovens, for want of a better word, in which the bodies are inserted?
I think we do want a better word.
OK, but you know exactly what I'm saying.
Of course.
In mortuaries, the tables have had to be made bigger because the bodies are bigger they're examining. So this is just another example of the fact that the world is getting bigger, and it's a much, much, much more serious problem than occasionally the firemen having to smash a wall down, literally, to get a huge, obese, lardy-like individual out of that building and into an ambulance which can barely support the weight of the person. It's a huge problem.
Can I make a link?
Go for it.
Between the last story, when we were talking about innocent drinks and obesity, because isn't it easier to kind of go, oh, look at we really care about the world, look at our stance on trans issues or LGBTQ issues. But what they're not doing is Coca-Cola is not looking at the way that it produces its drinks and the way it produces its food stuff. And it is filling them still with sugar and all sorts of other things.
Processed snacks.
Yeah. And so, is it any wonder that people are... Because we know that obesity is part of the food chain, isn't it? It's part of the
It's also part of
the big industry.
we
so
have
isn't it easier, though? Isn't it easier for the innocent and Coca-Cola to go, look how good we are on this, but let's not talk about this.
Almost a distraction.
Yeah, and let's not talk about this stuff that's actually harming people.
Of course, Coca-Cola would argue that they've developed a range of products that are low-calorie.
Well, it's still full of sugar. Yeah. Spartan is absolutely dreadful for you. But look, this problem goes... Do you know that British kids have the worst diet in the world? In the world. According to the Nutrition Trust, British kids have the worst diet. I mean, and we are talking about sugar. Yeah, of course it is.
Yeah.
Sugars. I mean, we do have a choice, guys, about what we put into our mouths. And people in this country don't really cook. They unpack.
Yeah.
In Italy, in France, in Spain...
I agree, Mediterranean.
They have more of an honour of making dinner, sitting down at the table. It's not... It has to come at government level because we need education. Of course we do. We need to be educated on what to eat. And also, all the stuff like, do you remember the triangle that they used to teach us about years ago?
Food pyramid.
Yeah, the food... It needs to be inverted the other way round.
It's completely wrong, in my opinion.
Too much carbohydrate, not enough protein. Half your plate should always be green. And I'm sorry, when I used to send my daughter to school with a salad, beetroot, tomatoes, pomegranate, they all laughed at her. When they come round my house,
they love it.
They only wanted to eat white bread in my house.
Well, you've got to get them trained up. Let's talk about white bread, by the way, because going to the pond with a bag of breads and tossing it to the ducks is a cherished memory for many of us, but not if one London council's got anything to do with it. They say that bread doesn't nourish the ducks and is probably killing them. So should people be fined for feeding ducks? Mike, you seem to have strong views on this.
I have very strong views on it. I'm a member of a duck conservancy in Surrey, down in Stockbroker Belt, OK? We look after our ducks down there. We've got lots of ponds, lots of ducks on them. Quack, quack. Thank you very much indeed. Nice imitation.
Is criticism like water off a duck's back to you?
Water off a duck's back to me. Now, I stand on the edge of the pond sometimes. I'm dishing out the bread,
You're a murderer. You're a murderer.
No, I'm not a murderer. Now, some people come along and they go tut-tut and all that kind of stuff, and I just give them, a lecture on how not to be so specific about things they don't know about. Now, the people who come along with the peas and the carrots and chuck them onto the pond, my ducks just do a U-turn. They're away. They couldn't care less about frozen peas or carrots and like that. They love the bread, and the bread has never killed a duck, OK?
There you go.
Ducks are the most beautiful animals in the world. You look at the colour design of a duck, you know, and the beautiful feathers they have and all that. We've got to cherish our ducks, and ducks will only eat soggy white bread.
All right, well, look, producer Greg, can you get the definitive response from vets as to whether or not we should be feeding ducks white bread? Last but not least, smokers gain the equivalent of an extra week's holiday every year from stepping outside for a fag break. A new study shows this can take as much as 20 minutes out of some people's working day, which adds up to 39 hours a year. So, given that they sneak out for so many ciggies, should smokers be forced to work overtime? Lisa?
No, let's not. We're not people that want to dictate and tell everybody what the rules are.
But you know, they got to leave the office. They got to get in the lift. You got to get outside. They got to light up.
That's right.
It's a ritual.
I used to
and then
work.
litter the pavement with filthy,
listen,
cigarette butt ends.
I used to work.
Disgusting.
I used to actually have a real job. I used to work in a factory and making tights.
Yes, that was
and
a real job.
everybody.
Pretty Polly?
Yes, at Pretty Polly.
Was that your nickname?
No, that was...
Should have been.
Well, we now know we no longer make tights in this country.
It's quite sad, really.
Yeah, no more factories. But the girls, everybody there could get a fag break. I didn't smoke, but I used to go anyway. Because that's where the best gossip was.
Yeah, but
where's
also,
the office gossip coming from if you don't have the fag break?
If you have a cigarette break, others are having a cigarette break, and you don't smoke, you should be allowed to have a coffee break.
Well, that's exactly right.
Yeah, that you should be allowed because
Mike, if you're not having a cigarette, what would you be doing then?
I'd just work. I'd prefer work to having a coffee break.
What about
or
a
cigarette
half a lager at the local round the corner?
No, more like 2.5 pints in 5 minutes.
What about the gossip?
But can I also say that these people going out smoking their cigarettes, when they come back, they are a less productive worker.
You don't know that.
Yes, I do. Every cigarette they take like this, they are furring up their arteries. They therefore cannot be as productive a human being as somebody like me who does not smoke.
Nobody is more productive than Mike Parry, and he's back at 10 reacting to my take at 10. It's all about Phillip Schofield. I'm sorry, folks, I don't buy his crocodile tears. You won't want to miss my first comments since his television interview and Sun chat. But next up, my Mark Meets guest is a man who has done everything in broadcasting. Radio and TV legend Mike Reid, Top of the Pops, Radio 1, you name it. He's up next.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
I'm Andrew Doyle.
Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News. Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There'll be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'll be dealing with Phillip Schofield in literally 12 minutes' time in My Take at 10. You won't want to miss it. But look, a big reaction to our discussion about should you feed ducks bread in the park? Well done, Director Jonathan, who's done some research on this. The RSPCA say, although ducks, geese and swans are able to digest bread, it can leave them feeling full without them having gained the nutrients, vitamins and minerals they need from their natural food. They recommend peas, sweet corn, oats and birdseed. There you go. It's time now for Mark Meets, in which I speak to the biggest names in the world of politics, showbiz, sport, business and beyond. Tonight, a man who has done just about everything in broadcasting. Radio and TV legend Mike Reid, host of Top of the Pops and Saturday Superstore. But a man who made his name at Radio Luxembourg before joining Radio 1 and ultimately becoming King of Breakfast, where he entertained an audience of millions for 5 years. After that, Capital Gold, Classic FM, Magic. This is a guy with radio in his DNA. He's put on musicals, recorded pop records, and even written a chart-topping hit for Cliff Richard. Plus, he entertained scores of ITV viewers with a memorable stint in the jungle on I'm a Celebrity. Mike Reid, welcome to Mark Dolan Tonight.
Thank you very much, Mark. How are you doing?
I'm very well. Great to have you on the show. What a career. How did you get into broadcasting?
I got in, there was a guy on local radio who was running it called Neil French Blake. And Neil called me in one day. I'd played in a few cricket matches and he'd been there. And he said, I want you on my station for 3 reasons. He said, 1, you're terribly English. He said, 2, you're mildly eccentric. And 3, you're a bloody good opening bowler. And I said, what's the last one got to do with it? He said, I'm starting a cricket team and you're opening the bowling. I said, do you not want to hear me broadcast? He said, I'll be fine. And that was it. I was in. So when people ask how you get into radio, I think everybody gets in a totally different way, you know.
And for some of my younger viewers, can you give them a sense of how massive Top of the Pops was?
Yeah, all those programs were big, but don't forget there were only 4 channels then. I mean, there are now hundreds of channels, loads of radio stations, but then there were 4. So Saturday morning, Saturday Superstore, we regularly got 10 million. Pop was on a Saturday night, we got 10 million. Top of the Pops to get 15 or 16 million. I think the Radio 1 Breakfast Show got about 14 million. So they were big, but there wasn't the competition there is now. So it wasn't as diluted. So that was one reason you probably got those figures. But it was just fun to do. You know, Mark, I really thought at the time I was just having a good time. But it turns out I learned stuff. Latterly, I realized that I actually did learn things. You know, you learn about the legalities of things, what you can say, what you can't say, how to treat people, how to deal with people, you know, how to have a good time, how to be a team member. Certainly on TV, you know this as well as anybody. You may be the front man, but there's a whole lot of people behind you making it work. It's not just you. You either get the brickbats or the bouquets, whatever's coming your way, but it's the whole team, and you're just the tip of the iceberg.
Too right. And of course, when you were at Radio 1, that was a golden era for the network. You were the king of breakfast with an army of fans and the likes of yourself and Simon Bates and all of those legends. You know, you were the rock stars of your era. Do you think radio is still the art form it once was, Mike?
I think it's more straitjacketed now, and I listen to it. I hear people that don't have a say. One of the great things was that you pick the music, and I still do breakfast for various shows now in the UK and Canada. But I'm lucky I get to pick the music. And if you've got ears, somebody said to me recently, you're an A&R man, you're a record company as well as being on the radio. You're listening to music. 3 years ago, I created the Heritage Chart because there were a lot of heritage artists still making great music, weren't being touched by the major stations. And they said, the Nick Kershaw's, the Paul Youngs, the Kim Wildes, the Howard Jones. Well, what do we do? Where do we go? So 3 years ago, the anniversary is coming up in July. I started the Heritage Chart, and we're on the 66th TV show this week as well. So that's worked well. It's been a good shop window for those artists. So, yeah, I've always liked to be involved. And I think at a lot of radio now, you can't be involved. They don't let you get involved. This is what we're playing. This is what we're doing. This is how we do it. And I think that would frustrate me enormously.
The Heritage Chart is a fabulous, fabulous legacy of yours, and it can be found at heritagechart.co.uk. Highly recommended. Let's talk about the current world of radio. What do you make of Ken Bruce leaving Radio 2 after all those years? I have it, Mike, on good authority that he wasn't really offered a new contract.
I wouldn't know, so I really can't comment. We only comment on stuff we see on social media or in the media, so I really don't know. Ken's always been a great broadcaster. He's done a great job at Radio 2. Sometimes it's, there he is, look. Sometimes, it's time to move on. It's time to go somewhere else. You, like anyone, like a footballer, you think, hello, maybe it's time to move on. Do you move on before you're pushed or whatever? I don't know. But he's found a new home, and he sounds quite happy on it, so... that's always good. It's when you're not doing what you love. Well, one thing I talk to people about in radio, and they say we're doing a job we love in a way that we don't, and that is frustrating, I think. I'd never really want to do that.
Tell me about your latest project, a brand new book out in July.
It's a series of books. I'm doing 6 books on 1,000 Years of a London Street. I had Denmark Street out... a couple of years ago. Cheapside comes out. There it is. 1,000 Years of Cheapside with a lot of characters who are in it, including 2 broadcasters we can see there. That's out in July, 1,000 Years of Cheapside. And then the next one is 1,000 Years of Piccadilly. It's great fun to do. I love it. I've always been a historian. I've been on archaeological digs since I was 7, 8 years old. So I've always done that. I've always been on stage since 8 as well, which again gives you a good, doing archaeological digs, being on stage gives you a good sort of sense of playing in a team and a bit of confidence and a bit of knowledge as well. But no, I love doing these books. It's great.
Mike, thrilled to have you on the show. I've been listening to you and watching you for so many years, and you are still the gold standard. Thanks for joining us on Mark Dolan Tonight.
Thank you very much, Mark. Thank you.
There you go, Mike Reed. I tell you what a cast list we've had tonight. Very excited about the next hour because Kim Woodburn joins us live. Let's talk about Holly Willoughby. Is it right that she's going back to This Morning? We're told she'll be on set on Monday. Is that the right thing to do? Do you believe that she knew nothing? Well, I'll be asking Kim Woodburn about that. But at 10 o'clock, it's the long-awaited Take at 10, in which I'll be dealing with Phillip Schofield following his bombshell interview with the Sun newspaper and the BBC. I don't buy his crocodile tears. My reaction in just a couple of minutes. First, the headlines.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, "Nah, stop arguing." I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment.
I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it. So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better.
Crop failures, famine, war, suffering on a scale completely unimaginable.
We are putting the cart before the horse. As Charles I said at the scaffold, he was the true defender of liberty.
Yeah, I've completely derailed the conversation.
Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views, and often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
It's 10 o'clock on television, on radio and online in the United Kingdom and across the world. This is Mark Dolan Tonight. In my take at 10, following his bombshell interview with the Sun newspaper and the BBC, I'm not buying Phillip Schofield's crocodile tears. Tonight's newsmaker is the fearless TV star Kim Woodburn, who'll be dropping some more truth bombs about the Schofield saga, particularly how much Holly Willoughby may or may not have known. And Mark Dolan Tonight is the home of the papers, with tomorrow's front pages at exactly 10:30 sharp. Plus my top pundits as well, who haven't been told what to say and who don't follow the script. But my Schofield monologue is incoming. Put your hats on, folks, it's going to be a lively ride. A busy hour to come. First, the headlines with Bethany Elsey.
Mark, thank you. Here's your top stories from the GB newsroom. Boris Johnson says he sent all unredacted WhatsApp messages directly to the Covid inquiry, bypassing the Cabinet Office. The former Prime Minister told the inquiry chair he would like to do the same with messages on an old phone he used before May 2021, but it's locked due to security concerns. It's after the inquiry announced it's bringing a legal challenge against the Cabinet Office after it missed yesterday's deadline to hand over all Mr Johnson's messages and diaries. At least 80 people have now been killed and 850 injured after 2 passenger trains collided in India. The Coromandel Express, which runs from Kolkata to Chennai, crashed into the Howrah Superfast Express in the eastern state of Odisha. Videos show people climbing over the toppled carriages as the injured were carried to ambulances. Officials say the number of fatalities is expected to rise. Phillip Schofield says he believes the outrage over his affair with a younger male colleague has been fuelled by homophobia. The former This Morning host says he feels ashamed and that he's desperately sorry about the affair, but insisted the relationship was consensual and that he didn't groom him. In an interview with the BBC, he admitted his career is now over and that he'd lost everything, but said if he'd had an affair with a woman, it wouldn't have been such a big scandal. A 19-year-old has been sentenced to life in prison with a minimum term of 6 years after pleading guilty to planning terror attacks on the police and military. Matthew King from Essex converted to Islam and became radicalised during the COVID lockdown. The judge praised his mother, who reported him to the Prevent Counter-Terrorism programme, saying it couldn't have been easy, but was absolutely the right thing to do. 20 people have now been arrested in relation to the riots that followed a crash in which 2 teenagers were killed in Cardiff. The deaths of Kyrie Sullivan and Harvey Evans, who were 16 and 15, sparked violence and disorder on the streets of Ely after claims they were pursued by police. CCTV video shows the boys on an e-bike being followed by a police van. 15 officers were injured in the riots. And more disruption for holidaymakers this summer as security guards at Heathrow Airport announce further strike action. Unite the Union says its members will stage 33 days of industrial action in a dispute over pay. The walkouts will take place almost every weekend from mid-June to the end of August. You're up to date on TV, online, DAB+ radio and on TuneIn. This is GB News. Now it's back to Mark.
Thanks, Bethany. Welcome to Mark Dolan Tonight. This evening's newsmaker is the fearless TV star Kim Woodburn, who will be dropping more truth bombs about the Phillip Schofield saga. Mark Dolan Tonight is the home of the papers, with tomorrow's front pages from 10:30, plus tonight's headline heroes and back page zeros, with my top pundits who haven't been told what to say and who don't follow the script. Lots to get through, a big hour to come. We don't do boring. Not on my watch. I just won't have it. Let's start with this. Predictably, high-profile figures in the media are offering mild words of support for sex liar Phillip Schofield, with TV psychic Darren Brown tweeting the following. He wrote, I must be morally dim. I don't see why a TV presenter's intimate business should lead to public persecution. Makes me so uncomfortable having to ask friends why anything terrible has happened, why it warrants such shaming, and why it's supposed to be endlessly my business. Wow. Well, he must have been under hypnosis when he tweeted that one. There's also Alison Hammond, of whom I'm, by the way, a huge fan, crying her eyes out about how much she still loves Phil. And then there's former BBC star Richard Bacon, who says it's time to end the pylon. About the only celebrity that hasn't spoken out is Schofield's former colleague, Gordon the Gopher, who Schofield fingered for over a decade. Today saw the predictable interview with a major national newspaper, in this case, The Sun. Surprise, surprise, Schofield made it all about himself. I'm broken. I'm gutted. I'm devastated. Me, me, me. He said, I'll never be able to walk down the road again. I get teased at the butcher's about jumping the queue because of the Queen's funeral. In fact, Schofield even goes as far as to say, I've had a shit 2 years. Have you indeed? 2 years of lucrative television work. 2 years of commercial endorsements, award ceremonies, showbiz events, champagne and caviar. How does that compare to ordinary viewers of This Morning, who, still emotionally and financially punch-drunk from the pandemic, have got to deal with spiralling interest rates, exploding rents, and a cost of living crisis in which you now have to take out a loan just to buy a loaf of bread? But no, Phil's had a shit 2 years. Schofield wonders what he's going to do next. Well, I don't know. Maybe count your money, Phil. Yes, the star's media career is likely over, and this may be an overreaction. It may be too harsh. But unlike many in this country, he won't go hungry. Now, Schofield did hint about suicidal thoughts, and of course, that is a deep worry. For that, he should receive support, both from family and friends, and a professional. In getting that support, we wish him well. But I'm not buying the sob story. I don't buy the crocodile tears. It's his wife and kids who he lied to so egregiously whose tears are justified. He thinks this is even an example of homophobia. Take a listen.
If it was a heterosexual relationship, then, you know, it would have been a bit of nudge, nudge, wink, wink. If it's a gay relationship, then suddenly it raises eyebrows. It's wrong. Is predominantly homophobia.
Really? I'll be honest, it's my view that if a male presenter met a 15-year-old girl and exchanged multiple messages at that time, which I think is creepy, and then helped her get into TV and then had sex with her, it would be a huge story, possibly even bigger than this one. What's he on about? There was a clear power imbalance between Schofield and this poor lad, who we're told is now pulling pints in a northern pub. And given that the relationship became a full one, it's hard to see how that power wasn't abused. And what of Willoughby? Well, in my view, the halo has slipped for Little Miss Perfect, as the public tried to get their heads around the idea that she didn't know something was going on between Phil and his much younger ITV colleague. It doesn't add up. This young lad had been in TV for approximately 11 minutes before appearing on stage at the 2018 National Television Awards, much to the irritation of other colleagues. He enjoyed cameos as an elf on the Christmas special, and the Mail report that he didn't do much TV producing. Instead, he was hanging around with Phil and celebrity guests. This most junior member of staff gets elevated to that status on a show like This Morning, and there are no questions. Do me a favour. Willoughby hasn't commented today as she reaches the tail end of her Portuguese holiday in what the Sun report is her £8 million bolt hole. Nice work if you can get it. In the end, I think a lot of the vitriol towards Schofield is a broader issue about the media elite and these smug millionaires patronising you and talking down to you every day on TV. I think the public have had enough of TV fakes like Phillip Schofield, who pretend to be the lovely guy next door, but are anything but. This story reflects the slow-motion car crash that is establishment media and its ever-increasing corporate and woke messaging. Mark my words, Phillip will be the first of many. The elite will fall, and I can't wait. Bring popcorn. Is Schofield the victim of a witch hunt? Is he a victim of homophobia? Mark at gbnews.com, reacting to my Take a 10. My top pundits tonight: author and academic Dr. Lisa Mackenzie, journalist and commentator Lizzie Zeta, and radio and TV broadcaster Fleet Street legend Mike Porky Parry. Lizzie Zeta, do you buy Phillip Schofield's crocodile tears?
No, I don't. I've worked quite a lot at ITV, and I'm very close to somebody who also worked there. What happened there was absolutely dreadful. There was a massive amount of bullying. Emma Gormley and also Martin Frizzell, when they arrived, there was a massive cull of people at ITV. People moved sideways, they were sacked, their job titles were changed so that they could sack the PAYE, the people. The freelancers were lots and lots and lots of people were gotten rid of, and they got the people in that they wanted to get in. And this is after Emma Gormley said, "Oh, my door is always open." People that I know who went to her and made a complaint about the bullying were pushed out. So everything, I have to take my hat off to Eamon Holmes, because everything that man said was absolutely true. And he was one of the few people who went round to these people who were being made redundant and said, "What's going on? I'm really sorry to hear this," etc., etc. So, no, it's absolutely not homophobic, and it makes me sick that if it was a female girl, there would be an even bigger uproar. I have to say that you're absolutely right. And the problem lies with bullying is with the producers, not the crew, not the people around, but with the producers who allow these people to develop into mega gods, these presenters, and everything is about them. Everything is about them, and it's really wrong. And incidentally, I think they should give that lad back his job if he wants to work in television again. And I think that people should get together and try and sue ITV for lost work and being made redundant, unfair dismissal, because it's an absolute scandal.
Well, let me put it on record that I'm happy and I will need to clear it with the bosses, but I'm in principle happy to offer that young man a job on Mark Dolan tonight on GB News. I know that producer Greg will back this decision.
No,
because
absolutely.
clearly he has been at the wrong end of this showbiz drama. He's now out of work. Well, he's pulling pints in a northern pub. We'd love to have him here on Mark Dolan tonight. And that offer, it frankly, is one I'd like to develop and explore.
No, absolutely.
And if that gets to his people or if his friends find out, then pass on that message, because I think he should be working in TV. Very strange, Lisa McKenzie, that in a quite defensive interview with the BBC, Schofield said that there is no toxic culture out this morning.
When I watched that, I kind of thought two things. You know, this is the most human I've ever seen Phillip Schofield, because he normally doesn't look very human. You know, he looks very, fake. And all of a sudden his wrinkles are showing and his white hair and he's looking older. And then the homophobic thing as well. I'm not buying that. And the reason I'm not buying that is because my best mate, who is a gay man, said from day one, Phillip Schofield is not brave. Coming out as a 61-year-old man, he says, I'm brave. I came out in the 1980s as a 16-year-old lad in an ex-mining community. Yeah. That's bravery. And, you know, a lot of the gay community are not supporting Phillip Schofield. So I'm not, I think the homophobic stuff is, it's a reach, isn't it?
Michael, you've had to decipher the personality traits of some of the most famous people in the world, politicians, pop stars, actors, you name it. What's your professional verdict on what Schofield had to say today?
Well, I think Schofield's only the tip of the iceberg of a huge conspiracy. I think there's a huge conspiracy going on. There's a story doing the rounds at the moment that 3 years ago, a national newspaper editor went to ITV and said, we know about the Phillip Schofield story. And the deal was, please don't use that one. We'll give you other stories with other big stars, which you can use, and we might up the advertising spend in your newspaper titles. And all this, I think, may come out, is it Tuesday this week, when there's a Commons inquiry? Because the very top people at ITV are going to be asked, how long did you know this was going on for? I mean, already, the claim from ITV that, well, we asked both sides. We asked Phillip, and Phillip's admitted, as we know, to lying. But we asked the young boy who was his lover. But the young boy we're talking about has come back on that and said, nobody ever asked me. Nobody ever asked me if I was in a relationship with Phillip Schofield. So that in itself is a cloud of misinformation, people covering each other's backs, who's going to take the rap. You mentioned Martin Frizzell, the editor of the programme. He must be very worried now because apparently he was the biggest cheerleader for Phillip Schofield for years, but has gone very cold on him over the last couple of months, last 3 months or whatever. And mentioning Eamon as well, Eamon Holmes. Eamon was put in the invidious position of being put into this incredible drama which surrounded Phillip Schofield coming out without Eamon properly being told what his part in the drama was. He and Ruth, agreed to turn up on set with Schofield and Holly, kind of knew what was going on because Schofield had personally admitted to Eamon, I'm gay, and Eamon responded and said, so what? Because that's what we'd all say, right? But then it turned into the most massive drama where Schofield is hugging Ruth, but at the same time reaching out and trying to clutch Eamon's arm and drawing him towards him. And it was almost like they were using Eamon as a smokescreen for something much bigger that was going on in the background, but they wanted Eamon Holmes to give the whole thing respectability, and that, to me, is utterly disgraceful.
Yes,
Mark, can I...
Sorry, Mark. Briefly, if you can.
Yeah, very briefly. Look at the timeline. The guy was 18 years old when he was hired. What was done? Oh, it's just past midnight. He's 18 now. Now we can hire him. Of course he had a relationship with the guy prior to that. I mean, I don't buy any of it.
OK, well, I'm delighted to say that this story is coming back at 10:30 because it's featuring in several of the front pages. We'll be hitting that bang on 10:30 with full pundit reaction. And listen, next up, we're going to look at whether or not Holly Willoughby should be back on this morning. Should she return to the show on Monday? What do you think? Do you want to watch her back on the programme? Does she still have credibility? Do you believe that she knew nothing all along? Also, was Phillip Schofield genuinely close to suicide. Is he still a suicide risk? I'll be asking tonight's newsmaker, the fearless Kim Woodburn. She's next.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things. We've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed. So I guess they've always been quite woke. That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat.
Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News. The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Well, look, some strong emails coming in. Mark at gbnews.com. Do you buy Phillip Schofield's crocodile tears? Well, here's Wendy, who's not pulling her punches. Wendy says, Mark, I hope for your sakes that Phillip does not take his own life. If he does, you and your cohorts, including the saintly Eamon Holmes, will certainly be culpable. You really are a pile of know-nothing gossips who delight in a person's fall from grace. What a shame you don't have anything intelligent to discuss. Wendy, not happy with this debate. Do you think that this programme, this channel and the media are making a mountain out of a molehill? Do you agree with Wendy on that? Mark at gbnews.com. Yes, Holly should go back to this morning, says Wayne, as she has done nothing wrong. This man has said he knows what Caroline Flack went through. How dare he bullied this poor girl on the sofa of this morning, and so jog on, says Wayne. More of your emails. It's just they're coming in thick and fast. I've got to say, an unprecedented number of emails. We were sick of seeing Schofield on every show, says Adrian. ITV needs to stop depending on a certain few stars. There's plenty out there. Schofield deserves what he gets. Richard, crocodile tears and throwing every card onto the table to spin maximum sympathy. Pass me a violin and make it a small one. Fake off, says Richard. Can I just say that your emails are getting more poetic and creative by the day. It's always the highlight of my show. Let me tell you, we've got tomorrow's papers, and there's a lot of Schofield in there, let me tell you. That's at 10:30 sharp. On Schofield, more to come. Let's have a look at Keith, who says, hi, why is Phillip Schofield making such a drama about losing work? He's nearly at retirement age, and lots of people are made redundant at similar ages. The difference is that he's worth millions and can choose never to work again or start in some other field without ever having any money worries. What he has got to be miserable about is very little. He should come down to earth and be grateful for what he's got and enjoy his retirement, says Keith. Well, as I pointed out in my take at 10, it might be an overreaction that his career is over. It might be a bit harsh, but unlike many of you, if you lose your job, he won't be going hungry. Mark at GBNews.com. I'll get to more of your emails shortly. Let's get further thoughts now from my top pundits, author and academic Dr. Lisa McKenzie, journalist and commentator Lizzie Zita, and radio and TV legend Mike Porky Parry. And listen, we're trying to get a line to the brilliant Kim Woodburn, but there's an internet connection issue, so I'm desperate to get her on. Greg, maybe we do it after 10:30 if we can make that work. But I would ask you, Mike Parry, whether Wendy is right that actually we are making a mountain out of a molehill, and that, frankly, we're celebrating a man's fall from grace. What do you think?
No, we're not celebrating a man's fall from grace. What we're doing is we're all standing back in amazement that such a huge scandal could be happening right in front of our very eyes. He was on the couch every morning with Holly, and people aren't stupid. And over the last 2 or 3 months, people have noticed the division between the two of them moving away. The other things that interest me are as the balance of power between the two of them started to shift, Holly started to become more popular. Phil became less popular. There was a front cover of I think it was the Sunday Times magazine, which was a tribute to Holly Willoughby after I think she'd done the
I'm
thing
a Celebrity.
With Yes, that's right.
Because Ant McParlin got the driving issue, so he took a series off.
That's right. Now, she won an award for that, but also it really upped her profile, you know what I mean? And they never talked about that on the set. Isn't that ridiculous? You know, your co-worker gets this great award and you don't talk about it. Also, when they had the Queen's Q-Gate problem, Holly wanted to apologise and did make some reference to it, but Phil, no, absolutely stumped, didn't want to say anything about it. So it was obvious that there was tension between the two of them. So for anybody to say, oh, it's all exaggerated, oh, it's all a storm in a teacup, it's not. He's one of the biggest stars on British TV. He generates tens, if not hundreds of millions of pounds in revenues for ITV. It's a major story. It's been handled brilliantly by a lot of our great journalists in this country, including Eamon Holmes, sometimes of this parish. And the truth is now coming out because only the truth matters here, and everything that's been going on in the background for the last 2 or 3 years, hopefully, will be revealed in the Commons inquiry coming up next week and thereafter, because we've all been taken for fools and there's been bucket loads of deceit, and that deceit has got to be unveiled.
Well, I've got to say the front pages are coming in thick and fast, and we will hear from Lisa and Lizzie and Mike Porky Parry in just a couple of minutes. Hot off the press, Schofield, Willoughby. There's only one show in town, so we'll cover all of that. Keep those emails coming. Is this a cruel witch hunt against Phillip Schofield? Mark at gbnews.com. Don't go anywhere. Tomorrow's papers are next.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the people's channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing. We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me. So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News. Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There'll be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's coming up to 10:30. As always, on a Friday, Saturday and Sunday, we bring you tomorrow's papers hot off the press with full pundit reaction from three pundits who haven't been told what to say and who certainly don't follow the script. And they are in. Let's start with the I newspaper, and they lead with the following. UK public blames Brexit for higher food prices. Daily Mirror. Alison's tears for Phil. This morning, presenter breaks down on air and says he has done wrong. The Daily Telegraph. Remote work lifestyle to drop house prices by 10% for good. Wealthy fleeing the UK to avoid inheritance tax, say financial advisors. And ministers had secret unit to curb critics of lockdown. The Guardian next. Game-changing drug could boost breast cancer survival rates. Daily Express. At last, you're listening. Banks put up savings rates. The Times on a Saturday, blood test promises fast cancer diagnosis. At last, some good news. The Daily Mail, unions line up another year of rail strike mayhem. Fresh-faced Holly flies back into this morning's storm as well. Let's have a look at The Sun. I fear being spat on. Phillip Schofield exclusive interview. Fallen star Phillip Schofield fears he will be spat on in the streets after confessing to his affair with a younger colleague. He admits today, I do not know a time I will be able to walk out of the door. OK, what have we got next? What's next, folks? The Star. Who the hell are these sickos? Britain is becoming a nation of deviants as 13% of people admit pouring tea or coffee on their cereal. Talk about a wrong 'un. Absolute shocker. Those are your front pages. Let's get full pundit reaction now from my fantastic pundits. I am delighted to have the ethnographer, the academic Dr. Lisa Mackenzie, journalist and commentator Lizzie Zeta, and radio and TV broadcaster Fleet Street legend Mike Porky Parry. So many stories to get through. Mike, I don't fancy that. unions line up another year of rail strike mayhem.
Yeah, it's all political, isn't it? We know that for a fact. There's plenty of evidence that a lot of people, certainly in the background of the railway unions, have admitted that it's an overtly political move to try and get rid of the current government. But I don't know why they're bothering, because it looks like the current...
wages for their workers?
I was going to say...
Are they just trying to get wages for their workers?
Well, why don't they put the successive offers to their workers in a ballot, and then their workers can come back? They say, oh, no, we've got a system in which all the workers are consulted, but everybody I speak to says the ballot has not taken place on the government stroke the railway owners' latest offer. And if you don't put the... I mean, look, they're getting £65,000 a year, so they're already getting double. They're getting double what the national wage is.
Not true.
And yet they are pig-headed in refusing to even consider things like working Sunday's a normal day instead of working Sunday is always overtime. Antiquated working practices which they won't give way on.
That's not true.
It is all true.
The RMT...
Every word I say is true.
The RMT represent a range of people who work in the railways.
Yes.
Some are on 25, 26 grand a year.
And some drivers
a tiny minority.
But
the drivers are on 65.
The drivers are on 60k
plus. But the drivers are not represented by the RMT. The drivers have got a different union. The RMT represent the people who work on the railway.
I know, and railway drivers as well.
But the railway drivers are in a union that is constantly striking.
But we're talking about the RMT.
Railway workers.
And listen, aren't we fed up? I am fed up of having no NHS what's working, not getting a GP, paying 400 quid for a loaf of bread, terrified that my rent is going to go up. I am sick to death of this.
We all are.
And so the thing is why are we attacking each other when we know we've got a big...
What the unions are asking for is a pay rise, which will cement inflation into the system for years to come. And inflation is our biggest problem.
Yes.
Plus the national debt. Who's going to pay for this?
True. Well, the national debt was supposed to be our biggest problem in 2013, 2011, and then we had austerity. And what has been the fallout of austerity? The state of the country that we've now got.
Hang on, you seem to forget Ukraine. You seem to forget the pandemic.
These are all factors. Any of those things,
these are all factors which have contributed to it. Working people, and that's what railway workers are determined, or at least their bosses are, to ruin the lives of other working people. I live very close to Epsom Racecourse, right? It's the Derby tomorrow. And yet, little towns around Epsom where people go and stay will lose trade hand over fist. The bars will not be full. The hotels are not full. The restaurants are not full because people can't get there because of the railway workers. It's a disgrace.
Moving on to the Telegraph, Lizzie Zeta. Ministers had secret unit to curb critics of lockdown. There's a surprise.
Oh, yeah, well, I'm shocked and horrified. Not. Of course they had.
Sounds a bit
they
Big Brother,
wanted
this,
to always push their agenda, their view. Of course they had systems in place to sort of cover up what was really happening, etc.
To exaggerate the fear?
Yeah, to exaggerate, to make us all absolutely terrified, to sort of stay at home. It went from... I do have a certain amount of sympathy because we did not know what we were dealing with initially. And it was very, very frightening.
Maybe very initially, for the first few weeks.
Yeah. But then after that... Well, it was... I don't think we would not listen again. It's like that poem. If the old radio would speak, we would not listen. We would not let this old world swallow up our children at one great big gulp. Now, how I remember that from school, it's Edward Muir poem, The Horses. So, listen, we wouldn't do... Yeah, but, hey, I can't remember what I had for breakfast, but I remember the Muir poem. But, I just think that disgraceful.
I think there's a reflection. I think the country is in quite a reflective mood at the moment, actually, and I think we are re-looking at the pandemic and the lockdowns, and then the damage that has caused. I mean, we're having a debate and an argument about what's happening in the economy and how people are struggling. Yeah. And the lockdowns were a big part of that.
Correct.
As is the war.
Great public debate. Those who
As
back, who thought maybe it would do more harm than good, Mike, were demonised, called granny killers.
Yeah, of course we were. It was absolutely ridiculous. Look at the state of the country now following the lockdown. The worst possible outcome of lockdown are all these people now who work from home. It has crashed the economy. Yeah. And the civil servants at the very top are most responsible for this, and I believe their behaviour has been disgraceful.
I think there's a worse, actually, consequence of lockdown, and that is for children who have lost...
Missed
missed
totally
2 years.
Yes. Children, and now truancy has been normalised.
Yeah. And let's also remember all those children who were at risk and never made it out of the lockdown.
I totally agree.
Yes.
Yeah, and also
the 4-day week has been normalised. The 4-day week is being normalised, right?
Well,
because of working from home.
Lizzie Zita, hold that thought. What were you going to say?
I'm sorry, Lizzie.
No, I was going to say that, you know, the teenagers, I'm surrounded by teenagers that had a terrible time. They were just coming up to their GCSEs. It's had an effect to this day. To isolate kids, to tell them to sit still, it's almost like... It's like telling the rain not to fall.
Yes.
It was awful.
And then when they're adults, they'll be picking up the bill for what I consider a failed experiment to stop a virus. I should say the government, the authorities would argue that what they did saved lives. That's not my view, but that is their strong view. Mike Parry, you just dropped a bit of a bombshell there, suggesting that the pandemic has normalised working from home and normalised the 4-day working week. So has lockdowns turned Britain lazy?
What lockdown has done is it's given lazy people the opportunity to be even more lazy. What's that? Is it that council in Cambridgeshire that's now gone on to a 4-day week permanently? That means
that's a Liberal Democrat council.
Yeah, that will spread throughout the country now. OK, but the very idea now that you should say to somebody, get off your Peloton, which is having big financial problems, by the way.
Is that a cocktail?
Yeah. Get off your Peloton and get your ass into work, you know, instead of your bicycle seat, and get it into your the chair next to your desk at work. That has gone forever on a 5-day-a-week basis or even a 4-day-a-week basis.
But there's something else that's happening.
And that will smash the economy, I'm sorry.
And there's something else that's happening as well. The people that Jeremy Hunt wants to get the people over the age of 55 back to work, but 61% of those people have paid off their mortgages, and 63% of them are very, very happy with their investments. They stayed at home, they did a bit of gardening, they did a lot of cooking, and they thought, well, this is quite nice. They're not going to go back to work.
Can I also, as I always do every time I'm on this programme, I like to bring the other end of it, the people who are working in the supermarkets, the people who are working in the Amazon warehouses and the other large warehouses.
Security guards, taxi drivers.
They are not getting any opportunity. They're not getting the opportunity to work at home or to be lazy.
Of course you can't. You can't work at home if you're fitting carpets in my penthouse.
Well, what about that story? This bad news for Mike's penthouse, Lizzie Zita, because remote work lifestyle to drop house prices by 10% for good.
That's even worse.
David Miles, one of the 3 members of the OBR, the Office for Budget Responsibilities executive team, said he expected working from home to be a permanent change that would dampen house price growth within the next 3 or 4 years. He predicted that people would move further away from city centres, lowering demand for expensive properties in these areas and causing a net reduction in the average level of prices across the country. Is that such a bad thing?
No, it's not such a bad thing because the younger people have got more of a chance of getting onto the property ladder.
Yes, it's good.
A lot of buy-to-let landlords are selling off their properties because of the massive amount of tax they've been hit with.
Yeah.
So there's more properties in the market so that younger people, first-time buyers, there's been a surge in first-time buyers because it's still cheaper to have a mortgage, even with the interest rates going up, than it is to rent. In a way, it's a good thing. Listen, they went up massively. They went up massively. We don't need them to go up anymore.
To be honest, this story has a flaw. The flaw is that supply and demand. Whilst people still come to this country, housing is going to be needed.
I think housing, watch this space. It's going to be the biggest issue that we have in the next couple of years.
It's huge. Do you remember when we had bird flu in this country? I have a few properties that I rent out and I kind of say, I've sold, your property's going to devalue by 50%. I said, why? said, well, so many people are going to die of bird flu that there'll be too much... No, seriously, there'll be too much property in this country, and I'm afraid you'll ruin it.
What a clucking idiot.
Not one single person died of bird flu.
The housing crisis...
I'm spitting feathers.
The housing crisis is going to be our greatest issue.
But
it's a national failure.
It is a national failure, but both the Labour and the Conservative government have not done what they needed to do, which is build the minimum of 350,000 houses per year.
Totally agree.
And now they're messing around. Michael Gove is messing around with all of his white paper.
Yeah.
Some of it is good. Some of it is
But a lot of it's decked out.
A lot of it's well, it is. But you know, at the end of the day, 30% of buy-to-let landlords have fled the marketplace. What's that going to do? It's going to put the rent up,
it's
guys.
bad news for renters.
It is bad news.
My policy, and no one will touch it, is 1 million council houses needs to be built or acquired.
Yes, not luxury houses.
Over the next 5 years, let's say.
I think it's probably sooner.
Yeah.
We've
But
got
who
to
will
really...
fund them? Who will fund them?
Well, it's not just about who will fund them, because the sale of council houses, that money has been going back to central government for since 1980.
It has, yeah.
So local governments have not had any of that money.
But they haven't got any money to build houses now.
Do you know what? Today I was really thinking. I thought, in the 1930s when we'd got depression and war in 1940s, how come our councils were building lidos and schools, and libraries?
Because they prioritised it.
How were they doing that in the time of war and depression?
I'll tell you for why. Because the welfare state has reached unsustainable levels, and this
Very
country
unsustainable.
lives beyond its means.
About one third of all local council revenues now go on pensions for people who've been working there for the last 20 years, doing a job that's not needed to be done.
Also, can I just say, how much money are they getting, the local councils, from parking fines?
Yeah.
Really?
Millions.
My God.
Millions.
The parking fines are just like, how much are they getting? They could run the whole country on that.
Of course they could.
I'm being facetious, but honestly, it's ridiculous.
A racket. I've got to say that I know many of my viewers and listeners will argue that there's no point building more houses if you don't at some point get immigration to a sustainable level. Would you agree with that? Because if you've got net migration of 600,000, then that puts your 1 million council houses into the... It's basically dropping the ocean.
It's a huge problem.
Yeah.
It's a huge problem.
Yeah.
And there's no point. You can't outbuild immigration, can you?
No. I mean, one of the real issues about this, and is over the last, 2 years, 3 years, we've had 1 million people come in, but not anything else built for, not any infrastructure.
Well, the problem is...
No housing, no doctors.
We're building the wrong sort of properties because we need houses and we keep building flats. It's as simple as that.
That's
high-rise flats.
Another fair point. Listen, lots of emails coming in on a range of subjects. I've got to say, a very big story in the Sun newspaper. We're going to cover that next. I've been asking, are we too hard on Phillip Schofield? Ruth says, hi, Mark, I don't think you've been harsh on Schofield. I think his mea culpa is a desperate attempt to close it down before more unwise relationships come to light. Ruth goes on to say... And, of course, he's going to cry homophobia, last resort of a desperate man. Discrimination, that old chestnut. I pity his mother. Imagine having 2 sons like she has. Poor woman. Ruth, there you go, not pulling your punches. I love getting your emails. It's always the best bit of the show. Keep them coming. Mark at gbnews.uk. Next up, my pundits will be nominating their headline heroes and back page zeros, plus that headline in The Sun. Phillip Schofield, exclusive. I fear being spat on. We'll discuss that next.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment.
I came to GB News because it's the people's channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it. So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News, The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, The People's Channel. Britain's watching.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better.
Crop failures, famine, war, suffering on a scale completely unimaginable.
We are putting the cart before the horse. As Charles I said at the scaffold, he was the true defender of liberty.
Yeah, I've completely derailed the conversation.
Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
The Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views, and often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, The People's Channel, Britain's watching.
OK, well, look, more papers in the company of my top pundits. The emails are coming in thick and fast as well. Regarding the Schofield story, Mark Dolan tonight is officially offering this young man who's been hung, drawn and quartered by the press, by Phillip Schofield, a job on Mark Dolan tonight. I think he deserves it. Apparently, he's stuck in the north of England pulling pints. GB News is the best newsroom in the country. He'll be safe, he'll be looked after, and there'll be no funny business, let me tell you. Stephen said, Mark, you'd be better off offering a job to the person they sacked from Loose Women in order to move the young man Schofield had a relationship with. I've got no evidence to back that up, but thank you for your email, Stephen. You do wonder, don't you, whether there's more to come. Mike, you've got a nose for a story. Do you think there's more to come from this Schofield drama?
Well, as I've already said on the show, I think this week, the senior executives at ITV are in front of a Commons committee. Now, you've got to tell the truth there, and it's all got to come out. And those MPs, when you've seen those common committees, they don't half go for the jugular, don't they? So I think that will come out. But to answer your question succinctly, there's something new coming out every day. For instance, just 2 days ago, I read Alison Boshoff in the Daily Mail revealing for the first time there'd been a payoff. There'd been a payoff, she said in her story there, to the young man. Now, you know, these issues put them all together and the scandal just grows and grows, doesn't it?
Well, it does really.
The senior management there must have known. It's impossible to believe that they didn't know what was going on. This lad, as one of my colleagues here has already pointed out on the show already, at 18, was actually appearing live on the show. And he was supposed to be a runner. You know, a kid would come along to start
and he goes up to pick up the award at the NTA.
Goes up to pick up the award at the NTA, is dressed as an elf or something, appearing on the set, tasting whiskey.
There's no way that they didn't know, all of them.
Absolutely.
That's what I've heard.
Including Holly?
Yeah, I think so. Because, listen, he was so openly affectionate with the guy, etc. As I said, you don't sort of say, oh, is he 18? Oh, he's 18 now, I'm going to start the affair. There was a backstory to it.
And what about the Friday morning cab?
And also, I'd like to say that it's not just about Phillip Schofield. It's about, and let's be very clear, the producers that allowed this atmosphere of absolute bullying and tyranny to take place, and they got rid of all those really good people.
Well, it was very worrying when Schofield said to the BBC that there is no culture of bullying on the show, because It's an open secret there is, and therefore it makes you question everything he said.
Yeah, I think...
It's like a Meghan Markle moment, isn't it?
I think what perhaps is happening is people realise that this sort of stuff happens and they're just thinking about the Jimmy Savile stuff and the way that everyone knew about that and everybody went, oh, yeah, well, we didn't say because he didn't say. And I think that the country is probably now thinking, hang on a minute, are they doing it? You know, is this another one of those moments?
Yeah, too right. Daniel wants to know, was he paid for the interview on the Beeb or the Sun? And I understand, Daniel, that he was not paid.
No, but also, you know, people in that situation who are working at ITV, don't forget, it's their jobs on the line. They're frightened. After that huge cull happened, they're frightened for their jobs. They're self-employed. When you're self-employed, and a lot of them were on staff. So, you know, I've already said they changed the job title to move people sideways and to get rid of them.
Outrageous.
It's appalling behaviour.
Speaking of outrageous, by the way, Caroline Flack's mother has done an interview with the BBC about the controversy over Phillip Schofield's affair with a younger male colleague and his comments last night concerning her daughter Caroline. Flack says the broadcaster hasn't learnt from its mistakes surrounding her daughter's death and says on-screen talent must be protected. Take a listen.
No, they haven't learnt anything. They haven't. They treat them as commodities. And I know it's a lovely job and I know they earn money, but also the television stations that earn money from them. But they're not commodities, they're people and they're employed. And if my employee didn't take care of me, there'd be all hell to pay.
But what do you think, Mike, about the fact that Phillip Schofield invoked the memory of Caroline Flack, who took her life because of media pressure?
Well, she took her life because of the situation in which she found herself. She'd been suspended from her job because of a public spat, you know, a spat that became public.
Court case,
domestic
abuse,
she'd been
allegations.
charged and all this kind of stuff, you know. But I think that's getting right down and dirty, I think. When you're trying to protect your own reputation, you invoke the tragic death of a colleague in the same business by insinuating, you know, if people don't stop criticising me, you know, I could go the same as Caroline Flack. The other thing I thought, which wasn't terribly tasteful, was saying that without his two grown-up daughters, he wouldn't be here. I mean, you know, what sort of pressure is that putting on his daughters to say, oh, the only thing keeping your father alive is the fact that, you know, you're here to support him? And we haven't heard one word or one voice for Phillip Schofield's wife, have we? Not one word.
No,
not one
she's
word.
the real victim.
Do you know what?
She is, and also, you know, to live with a guy for all that time and then he came out as gay. Maybe she knew and they had an arrangement, but I felt so sorry for her. And also the girls, the two daughters. Yeah. I mean, what he's done to his family during all this time is unspeakable, really.
It's a real shocker. Well, let's get now to your nominations for Headline Heroes and Backpage Zeros. And I wonder if Schofield is a zero or a hero. Who have you got for me as your hero?
Hero, people who work in chip shops. Everybody who works in a chip shop.
Right. And they work late and they do a great job and they keep us
do,
fed.
and it's a great product and we love it and the British love fish and chips.
And it helped us win the war, fish and chips, didn't
and
it?
also tourists love it.
I grew up over a fish and chip shop. My parents had a fish and chip shop.
How well you turned out.
Fish and chip shops are closing at an enormous rate because they cannot make any profit.
Well, the government must support them. Briefly now, if you can, just nominate your Headline Heroes.
Eamon
Holmes.
Eamon
for being
Holmes,
heroic.
For being so honest. Everything he said, I know, personally, everything he said was true. And also for speaking up for the underdog.
Well said. Mike, briefly, if you can, your headline hero.
My hero is Professor Kathleen Stock.
Yeah.
She went to the Oxford Union and she faced down a mob of between 300 or 400 people who basically object to her being there because she has a different point of view in life to the one they have. And this is at one of our top universities.
Too right.
Where you're supposed to debate things.
Well, names only now. Your Backpage Zero.
Nadeem Zahawi, he just gets on my nerves.
OK, he's supporting getting rid of inheritance tax.
Yeah, that man, the only thing he does is try and line his pockets.
OK. Lizzie, briefly, if you can, your Backpage Zero.
Putin's Russia for taking 19,000 Ukrainian children and kidnapping them, basically, and taking them into Russia.
True monster. Mike, your zero, your Backpage Zero.
Football manager Jose Mourinho for bullying a referee who made a couple of decisions in a match that went against Jose's team. Utterly disgraceful.
Outrageous. Can I thank my fabulous pundits tonight? I think you'll agree they did a brilliant job. They'll all be back soon.
I agree.
Thanks to my team as well for working so hard today. And most importantly, to you for your company. This show is nothing without you. I'm back tomorrow from 9 till 11, so do join us then. Headliners is next. See you tomorrow at 9.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things. We've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White.